Hey guys, tonight we step into the sun-dappled workshops of Olympus, where Hermes, fleet of foot and swift of wit, conceives a labyrinth so cunning even he can't keep track of its turns. Imagine the forge's glow, painting molten bronze walls in flickering gold, the scent of fresh-cut laurel mingling with sculpted marble dust. You probably won't survive the thrill of a god sketching cosmic corridors without your pulse racing like a startled stag. But before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Oh, and tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at the edge of Mount Selene's workshop courtyard as Hermes paces his winged sandals, stirring dust into spirals. Mainstream mythographers place this moment in a lost era before Daedalus's fame, when even the idea of a maze was fresh as morning dew, roughly a century before the Minotaur first roamed Crete. You feel the chill of mountain air on your skin, almost tasting the tang of stone-cold marble broken by Hermes's impatient toe. Fringe Olympian diaries whisper that Hermes tested his labyrinth drawings by running blindfolded laps around Zeus's throne, weaving past columns until he nearly decapitated Hera's golden doves. Historians still argue whether that blindfolded trial inspired his maze's shifting walls, or if it's just one of those gossip-worthy divine embellishments. Hermes sketches his first lines in the sand spirals and jagged turns, so intricate they rival a spider's web spun at midnight. His caduceus staff taps each twist into permanence, leaving grooves that catch torchlight like veins of starlight. You crouch to trace a fingertip along a shallow groove, noting how each curve feels like the coil of a serpent ready to spring. 3 jokes drift through your mind. Picture Hermes lugging an oversized pencil and complaining, "Olympus needs its own stationary budget." Imagine him erasing entire wingspan of corridors because he felt like a change of pace, or the time he nearly signed his name upside down before catching himself with a cheeky grin that Hermes-style signature flair. He pauses, cocking his head at the distant echo of hammer strikes from Hephaestus's forge, proof that he needs divine metalworkers to bring his blueprint to life. Mainstream artisans' logs record that Hermes commissioned the Cyclopes for structural enchantments, weaving in hidden seams that let walls shift at his mental command. You hear the faint clank of chisels on bronze in the distance, an invitation to wander deeper into the workshop's corridors. Fringe engineering scrolls, however, suggest the Cyclopes sneaked in tiny slip joints, so Hermes could never entirely predict the maze's behavior, keeping the puzzle and his ego perennially entertained. Historians still argue whether those concealed joints were clever caveats or practical safeguards against boredom. As dusk falls, torches ignite along the courtyard walls their flicker revealing more of the maze's preliminary frame, towering stone buttresses supporting arches that loop back on themselves. You inhale the smoky scent of olive wood torches, recalling tales of travelers lost in labyrinths until morning star guided them home. The chill night breeze carries the faint bray of a donkey, Hermes's erstwhile work companion, whinnying in annoyance at every dead end. One joke pricks at your lips. Imagine the donkey polishing sandals instead of carrying messages, only to get hopelessly lost in a briefcase. But you stifle it, mindful of the labyrinth's hush closing around you. Hermes steps onto a raised dais at the courtyard's center, unveiling a full-scale model engraved on polished obsidian. Its surface glows under torchlight like a dark mirror of possibility. He circles it, cape swirling, as apprentices unroll parchment charts beside him. Mainstream cartographers note he drew cosmic alignments into the model constellations mapped to corridors so that on solstice nights, moonlight would bathe certain turns in silver luminescence. You run a fingertip along the obsidian's edge, feeling its cool perfection, and picture moonbeams tracing hidden pathways unseen by midday wanderers. Historians still argue whether those celestial alignments served navigational purpose or were poetic flourishes to dazzle dreamers. Suddenly, Hermes snaps his fingers and whispers an incantation, causing the model's walls to shimmer and reconfigure before your eyes. A passage you just memorized loops back on itself in an instant, trapping your reflection in the obsidian's dark depths. You gasp as your reflected face multiplies into confused echoes, staring back at you from corridors that vanish as swiftly as they appear. Fringe illusionists assert that Hermes's model used subtle mirror magic, tiny reflective facets hidden in the obsidian's sheen to mislead observers, teaching him which twists felt most disorienting. Historians still argue whether that shimmer was simple plaster dust catching light or genuine arcane sleight of hand. You lean closer, feeling the labyrinth's pulse thrumming beneath your fingertips. Each bubble in the molten bronze sample lying nearby hints at pockets that might flex or shift when touched. Mainstream metallurgists confirm Hermes tested bronze samples for malleability under divine heat, enough so walls could breathe and slide at his command. You almost hear the metal's low hum, as though alive with hermetic energy. Fringe metallurgists, though, claim those bubbles were accidental air pockets. Hermes mistakenly left, giving the labyrinth its unpredictable personality. Historians still argue whether Hermes designed the walls to move or simply forgot to purge the flux. The sky above darkens and constellations emerge. Orion's belt hovers above the workshop, unknowing oracle to the maze's maker. Hermes cloaked in shadow, and moonlight looks skyward, then back at his obsidian model, a sly smile playing at his lips. He spreads his hands and whispers once more, and the temporary model subsides into a swirling mist of bronze sparks, settling into half-formed corridors around you. You take a hesitant step forward, the ground beneath crunching with marble shards, tangible first steps into a maze born of a god's whim. As you stand amid these half-birthed walls, you sense both exhilaration and unease. This puzzle, so grand in ambition, carries within it the seeds of mystery and the promise of misdirection. Hermes's labyrinth isn't just stone and bronze. It's a mirror of his own restless mind, restless enough to lose itself in every turn. With that thought humming through your veins, prepare for the maze itself to greet you in Section 2, where rough drafts and cosmic measurements reveal the blueprint of infinite bewilderment. You step into a clearing where the sandy earth bears a giant spiral drawn in chalk, Hermes's first infinite sketch sprawling nearly 40 paces across the courtyard. The night air hums with anticipation as apprentices clutch parchment and charcoal, their fingers nervy with the thrill of mapping God-made geometry. You probably won't survive the dizzying precision of these rough drafts without your head spinning like a dervish, but lean in each line. Hermes draws Mary's cosmic scale to playful cunning, promising twists that loop back on themselves like the coils of a serpent. By mainstream calculations, Hermes began his design on the 14th of the Attic month Boedromion, equivalent to our mid-September, when the constellation Pegasus sailed high in the dusk sky. He marked that celestial alignment on his first draft, a circle at the maze's center, etched to mirror the great square of Pegasus, then spirals radiating outward in Fibonacci-like curves. You crouch to trace the chalked arcs, marveling at their smooth perfection over such a vast span of ground. Fringe scholastic footnotes, however, maintain that Hermes used divine proportion, the so-called Hermetic ratio, inscribed by Thoth himself, ensuring that each corridor's width corresponded to human heartbeat intervals, guiding wanderers' pulses into sync with the maze's rhythm. Historians still argue whether these proportions emerged from empirical observation or mythic overlay. Hermes moves on to angular notches, sharp 137. 5 these turns that in mainstream geometry echo the golden angle prized by mortal architects. You hear the whisper of wind through olive boughs as he taps his caduceus, stamping the angle into the dirt. Each notch splits the spiral into discrete chambers, promising false exits and hidden passages. Fringe theorists, though, assert these notches served as mnemonic markers, every turn aligned with a starlit landmark on Olympus, allowing Hermes to navigate by both dust and doves' cries. Historians still argue whether the golden angle guided divine or mortal compass. You lean in as Hermes uncorks a vial of powdered silver. Mortal artisans call it argentum fulgor and sprinkles it along critical junctions. In mainstream practice, silver traces denote safe paths, mapping routes that loop back to the center in under 3 minutes flight. You watch the granules glint under torchlight like fallen stars. Fringe Olympian memoirs claim the silver also channels lunar energy, causing walls to shimmer on moonlit nights and reveal hidden runes. Historians still argue whether silver dust served practical wayfinding or lunar enchantment. At the spiral's edge, Hermes draws jagged lightning bolt breaks, deliberate chaos breaches. Mainstream mythographers link to his fleet-footed escapes from giant pursuers. These breaches permit random detours, ensuring no path remains fixed. You feel a thrill as you step over one bolt, the earth crunching underfoot. Fringe, Labyrinth. Psychologists, however, argue these jolts plant seeds of disorientation, triggering subtle stress patterns in travelers' minds that heighten the maze's mystique. Historians still argue whether chaos breaches evolved from playful whim or psychological design. Students cluster around Hermes's final stroke, a shallow pit rimmed with obsidian shards. Mainstream dexterity manuals describe this as the exit pit, a trapdoor leading back to the courtyard only when all other paths fail. You gaze into its black depths, imagining the thrill of surprise. Egress. Fringe tacticians, though, advocate for multiple such pits, hidden exits trained for Hermes alone, so he remains uncatchable even by his own design. Historians still argue whether single or multiple exit pits formed the maze's true loophole. With the sketch complete, Hermes steps back, sandals dust-caked and wings faintly aglow. He sweeps a hand across the chalk lines, erasing a small segment with a single flourish. You gasp. The corridor you'd memorized vanishes in an instant. Mainstream chronicles note this act as the final test of ingenuity. No mortal draft could match a god's whim. Fringe purists, however, insist this erasure sealed the maze's fate, making any attempt at mapping forever futile. Historians still argue whether erasures were playful edits or definitive design choices. You rise mind humming with curves, angles, and silver sparks. The infinite maze's blueprint lies before you, a cosmic spiral infused with golden angles, chaos, breaches, and hidden exits. But the true marvel isn't mere geometry. It's Hermes's restless creativity forging a puzzle that eludes even its creator. As you step toward the forge, where divine metals await Section 3, carry with you the memory of chalked spirals and argentum waypoints, the first promise that entry means endless, delightful bewilderment. You cross from the courtyard's chalked spiral into the roaring heat of Hephaestus's forge, where Cyclopes hammer bronze into living walls and sparks fly like captive fireflies. This is recruiting divine craftsmen, where Hermes trades barbed banter and sly compliments to enlist the workshop's mightiest smiths in shaping his labyrinth's metal bones. You probably won't survive the thunderous rhythm of hammers on anvil, Your chest rattles with each echo, but lean in. The maze's walls are not carted in by chisel alone, but born from divine forge craft. Hermes steps under a towering arch of bronze girders, the air thick with smoke and the scent of molten flux. Mainstream artisans' logs record that he arrived at dawn bearing fresh olive oil and ambrosial honey cakes, sacred offerings to grease both hammers and tempers. You watch him approach Cyclops Brontes, whose single red eye glows like a furnace's heart. With a deferential flourish, Hermes presents a silver-edged chalice of honey, its surface catching sunrise's first rays. Fringe forge mythographers insist that the honey was laced with powdered starlight light distilled from meteorites meant to temper the bronze with celestial fire. Historians still argue whether such starlight infusions ever touched the anvil or rest only in later poetic additions. Brontes sets aside his massive hammer muscle rippling beneath soot-black arms and accepts the chalice with a grunt. Mainstream notes say the Cyclops tested the offering by pouring honey onto a hot ingot. If it hissed cleanly, approval was granted. You hear the sharp hiss as golden liquid spatters on red metal steam rising in a fragrant plume. Fringe metallurgists, however, claim that testing honey on heated bronze revealed alloy purity. A clear hiss meant bronze met exact copper-tin ratios, while sputtering indicated impurity. Historians still argue whether this honey test doubled as sacred rite or practical quality control. By midday, Hermes stands before a row of Cyclopes, Steropes, and Arges, among them who flex arms scarred by countless anvils. He rolls up his sleeve to reveal a slender iron rod engraved with his caduceus, then dips it in coals to heat. Mainstream forge manuals note that heated rods test drafts of bronze sample plates, imposing curvature tests and resilience under fiery bend. You lean in as Hermes presses the rod into a glowing plate, creating a shallow arc. The bronze flexes without cracking its surface, rippling like molten water. Fringe experimentalists suggest this bend test aligned metal's grain structure, guiding the maze's shifting walls to flex precisely when he whispered its refrain. Historians still argue whether arc tests forged functional flexibility or birthed mythic metal memory. As afternoon shadows lengthen, Hermes convenes a council by the central crucible. He plucks bronze ingots, hand-sized discs, stamped from Olympus, in small relief letters and hands, each Cyclops a hammer. Mainstream excavation reports at ancient forge sites confirm such ingots bore mint marks to track imperial commissions. You catch the glint of stamped letters, Dios, of Zeus looping around an eagle's silhouette. Fringe administrative theorists argue these marks formed an early blockchain, ensuring each ingot's provenance and preventing mischief by underweight metal. Historians still argue whether mint marks secured quality or merely asserted heavenly patronage. The Cyclopes set to work their hammers, singing in syncopated thunder. You duck as a geyser of molten droplets arcs from a glowing crucible, the forge's roar matching the rhythm of your quickened heartbeat. Hermes moves among them, offering quiet praise. Sturdy as the sun's core he calls Steropes, sharper than Zeus's bolt to Arges. Mainstream liturgical records note that such epithets honored divine smiths, linking each hammer blow to cosmic forces. Fringe ritual scholars, however, argue the epithets acted as vocal catalysts, each phrase shaking the air to encourage sympathetic resonance in the metal, a form of vocal annealing. Historians still argue whether smiths heeded such praises as spiritual fuel or simply appreciated the flattery. By dusk, angled mold frames lie, ready massive semicircles carved from obsidian and stone set to receive molten bronze for the maze's first wall panel. Hermes climbs a low scaffolding, unrolling his obsidian blueprint. Cyclopes lean in chisels, poised. Mainstream architectural treatises describe these frames as self-supporting ribs, keyed to hidden pivot joints mechanisms, enabling wall segments to swing with silent grace. You trace the sinewy curves on the obsidian sheet finger, gliding over constellations Hermes mapped in Section 2. Fringe engineers suggest those pivot joints used magnetic lodestones, borrowed from Hephaestus's volcanic forges, to secure segments until summoned. Historians still argue whether magnetic locking was ancient craft or modern speculation. As the first ladle of molten bronze pours into a curved mold, Hermes whispers an incantation lost to mortal tongues. The metal settles with a soft roar, then cools into a flawless panel, its surface rippling with residual heat lines. You feel the warmth radiate through your boots. Mainstream metallurgists measure those lines as thermal fingerprints, evidence of controlled cooling that strengthen the bronze's internal lattice. Fringe arcane historians, though, claim the patterns formed pictographic runes encoding Hermes's presence into every grain. Historians still argue whether these striations recorded practical quenching or captured divine signature. Night falls and apprentices parade torch-lit panels through the courtyard toward preliminary foundations. You follow torch in hand as each panel clicks into bronze troughs set in marble plinths. The first wall segment swivels smoothly on its pivot, a silent promise of shifting corridors to come. Hermes stands back, haloed by torchlight, his winged sandals aglow with smith sparks. He nods, satisfaction glinting in his eyes. In that molten dance of fire and hammer, the labyrinth's walls were born, each panel a testament to divine craft, each rivet a bond between maker and maze. As you step toward Section 4's shifting paths, carry with you the echo of hammers, the hiss of honey, and the molten glow of first bronze pours a forge, dawned on destiny's first twist. You step through the wrought bronze archway and into the labyrinth's belly, where walls of burnished bronze tower above you, their surfaces etched with cyclopean rivets and caduceus emblems. This is the labyrinth of shifting paths, where corridors rearrange themselves on Hermes's silent command corridors that twist, retrace, and reform beneath your feet like living metal serpents. You probably won't survive the hall's restless geometry without your mind spinning in endless loops, but lean in each twist carries you deeper into divine misdirection, a puzzle that confounds even its master. At first, the passage feels delightfully straightforward, a broad corridor lined with polished panels that catch your torchlight in warm pools. Mainstream chronologies attribute these fixed sections to early trial runs. Hermes tested stability before unleashing full unpredictability. You run a finger along the wall's smooth join, feeling the faint seam where two panels lock in place. Fringe mechanical mythographers, however, maintain those seams, hide tiny spring-loaded pins triggered by Hermes's whispered caduceus chant, releasing stored tension to pivot walls on hidden hinges. Historians still argue whether such concealed mechanisms were truly built or remain fanciful reconstructions spun by dazzled observers. You stride forward, expecting closure, only to find your path sealed by a sliding door that groans as it shifts north instead of south. A three-light joke flickers through your mind. Picture Hermes smirking as you half bow to the closed door, or imagine a dazed Cyclops outside asking which way did he go before the door slides again, leaving it bewildered in the wrong corridor. You stifle a laugh, but the hall's hush reasserts itself, urging caution. The corridor narrows walls, inching imperceptibly closer, as you note a subtle change in the floor's pitch. Mainstream architectural surveys confirm that the labyrinth slopes on shallow sled rails, bronze tracks buried beneath marble chippings, allowing entire corridors to slide laterally when triggered. You step carefully, hearing a faint clunk as the metal beneath shifts, and feel the ground slide slightly. Fringe geotechnical engineers, though, argue the tracks functioned as primitive seismic dampers, smoothing tremors from Olympus's tectonic grumbles. Historians still argue whether sliding rails quelled divine earthquakes or solely served maze mechanics. Suddenly you pivot at an angled fork you're certain wasn't there moments ago. One branch glints with silver inlays, safe routes. Hermes, dusted with argentum fulgor, while the other is dark and ominous. Mainstream wayfinding guides caution that silver inlays mark return paths drawn from Section 2's chalked argentum waypoints. You hesitate, thinking of the golden whisk banging in your mind. Trust Hermes's shimmer. Fringe labyrinth psychologists warn that silver glints lure wanderers into cognitive bias, a mirage of safety that prompts premature trust. Historians still argue whether silver waypoints guided lost souls home or merely teased their false hopes. You choose the darker corridor, stepping onto a floor that snaps upright into a gentle upward incline. Mainstream structural analyses reveal that certain floor panels double as ramps, controlled by weighted counterbalances in the walls, tilting to reroute travelers. You feel your knees bend as you climb, heart ticking faster. Fringe network theorists, however, claim these slope panels formed a dynamic bar graph of maze usage, pressing heavier traffic corridors upward to divert pilgrims into lesser-traveled paths. Historians still argue whether slope shifts tracked footfall or simply confounded intruders. At the crest of the ramp, a mirrored niche reflects you infinitely in a narrow alley of polished bronze. Mainstream optics experts note that mirrored niches let you view multiple labyrinth angles to orient yourself. You lean in, squinting to catch a glimpse of your own back receding into darkness. Fringe. Surveillance historians argue these mirrors served as guard stations. Silent observers could watch your reflection and report your position by subtle echo whistles. Historians still argue whether mirrored niches aided real-time monitoring or inspired tales of omnipresent watchfulness. You press on breath-catching as walls slide again, carving a new passage with a metallic scrape that reverberates like distant thunder. A small mosaic tile inset in the floor, depicting a winged sandal, flickers red warning of an approaching dead end. Mainstream mosaic mapping studies suggest these tiles formed a visual breadcrumb system within the maze's unstable frame. You grin at the irony. A god's maze needs manual pixelated cues. Fringe semioticists, though, interpret sandal icons as silent texts Hermes left for himself, his own treasure map, back to the entrance. Historians still argue whether these tiles guided travelers or served as divine insider jokes. Your boots land on a damp patch, the first trace of water you've felt in bronze halls. Mainstream environmental reconstructions show cleverly positioned cisterns that release fine mists to lubricate sliding panels, ensuring smooth transitions. You inhale the cool, chlorinated scent and gag at the unexpected humidity. Fringe eco-design theorists claim this mist sprayed microbe-killing compounds, preserving bronze from oxidation in secret pockets. Historians still argue whether flooding sections served practical maintenance or purely dramatic effect. Ahead, a series of narrow channels carved into the wall flicker with torchlight sacrificial slots where wax tablets once sealed hidden levers. Mainstream archaeology confirms these slots held tablets listing labyrinth configurations updated after each trial run. You glimpse a tablet remnant still wedged in place, its cuneiform gibbering of north wing rotate 13 degrees. Fringe puzzle historians, however, maintain that slaves swapped tablets overnight, ensuring no mortal could memorize the shifts. Historians still argue whether these tablets guided trial resets or were red herrings to perplex scholars. Your cloak brushes a bronze fillet, and the adjoining wall crunches open to reveal a small bench, a lost resting spot for Hermes himself. On it lies a pair of winged boots, battered and singed. Mainstream lore holds that Hermes abandoned them here after one too many misfires. You pick up a boot, its strap still warm, and imagine slipping it on, only to have corridors reconfigure under your feet. Fringe boot fitter myths suggest these boots retained the labyrinth's pulse, empowering wearers to sense shifting walls. Historians still argue whether the boots held hidden lodestones or simply sparked clever tales. 3 light jokes streak across your thoughts. Envision a weary traveler stopping to polish the boots with a polishing cloth, only to be sucked past shifting walls. Imagine someone trying to take a selfie in the mirrored niche and getting lost in infinite clones. Or a minotaur strolling through sections, yawning and remarking, "Amateur design this." You bite your lip, stifling laughter as the hall's hush bears down once more. Finally, you reach a stark junction where 4 corridors meet none bearing silver inlays or sunken ramps. Mainstream maze mapping charts designate such spots as chaos cores, the labyrinth's most unpredictable nodes. You stand at the crossroads, sense prickling, as bronze panels slide slowly in all directions. Fringe chaos theorists assert these cores harnessed quantum whimsy, causing pattern shifts when unobserved. Historians still argue whether chaos cores emerged from divine caprice or the maze's sheer mechanical complexity. As you steel yourself to choose a path, north, southeast, or west, Hermes' laughter drifts from unseen galleries, a soft echo of delight at his own conundrum. Your pulse thrums in tandem with the wall's shifting heartbeats, the maze alive around you, guiding and misleading in equal measure. With each breath, you sense the infinite possibilities unfolding in bronze ribs and hidden joints. The labyrinth of shifting paths holds you in its metallic embrace, promising confounding wonder until you learn to think like Hermes himself, or until the maze thinks you obsolete. You tighten the straps of your borrowed winged sandals and step onto a raised bronze platform at the labyrinth's entrance, heart hammering like timpani in a hidden amphitheater. Here, in testing in winged sandals, you witness Hermes' first trial, runs footage of feathered footmen darting through shifting corridors, racing against time and their own pride. You probably won't survive the thrill of divine athletics without your pulse-skipping beats, but lean in each leap and misstep reveals the maze's mercurial nature and the god's knack for celestial slapstick. Hermes takes flight, a graceful arc over the first corridor landing in a flash of dust and bronze echoes. Mainstream mythographers date this inaugural test to the eve of the Panathenaic Games, when Hermes, ever the competitor, sought to prove his swiftness before crowds in Athens and beyond. You feel the platform's tremor as he alights his sandal wings, scattering charcoal embers like fallen constellations at his feet. Fringe Olympian pamphlets, however, claim that Hermes' sandals were rigged with tiny gravity-nullifying runes so that his landings barely disturb the ground. Historians still argue whether those runes were genuine enchantments bestowed by Hecate or later fanciful embellishments by bardic storytellers. You watch Hermes sprint at full tilt down a wide corridor, brushed bronze walls into whoosh-smooth tunnels, and vault over a sliding panel that snaps shut mere heartbeats later. Mainstream architectural surveys confirm that those sliding panels were timed to a 4-second beat, mirroring the average godly sprint pace measured by temple-calibrated clepsydras. You almost feel the panel's whispered click behind you, a mechanical applause marking your narrow escape. Fringe cartographic theorists, though, insist that the panels responded to the quantum twitch of feather tips on Hermes' sandals, a biological magical sensor ensuring no mortal could replicate his timing. Historians still argue whether walls moved on chronometric precision or on divinely attuned whim. In his second run, Hermes reaches for a bronze lever embedded in the wall, marked with a tiny wing icon, pausing mid-stride to flip it with a flourish. The corridor yaws into an unexpected spiral. You lean forward, toes gripping the platform's edge, tasting the smoky incense that drifts from dizzying shafts above. One joke stirs. Imagine a mortal runner stumbling into the lever and accidentally launching themselves backward into the starting gate. You stifle a grin, mindful that even at a god's trial, mishaps linger like echoes in the metal ribs. His third test proves more dramatic. A section of floor suddenly tilts, sending him gliding on one foot in a long gleaming arc. Mainstream forge records note these tilt plates were calibrated to a 15-degree angle, steep enough to challenge winged strides but gentle enough to prevent serious spills. You feel your own balance wobble just watching, as if the tilt plate's memory vibrates through the bronze. Fringe experimental smiths, however, argue that the plates were greased with an enchanted oil of cypress, rendering them slicker than mortal imagination. Historians still argue whether floor tilts derived from pragmatic engineering or from Dionysian bravado to humble passers-by. Hermes, barely off balance, catches himself with a flourish of caduceus, then darts toward a mirrored niche at corridor's end. He pauses, studying his reflection. 3 light jokes flicker in that mirrored grin. Does he practice battle poses in the reflection? Did he notice a strand of stardust in his hair? Does he wink at himself like a cosmic heckler? You lean closer to your own reflection in a nearby bronze panel, spotting the faintest curl of amusement in your eye. But the mirror walls ripple, swallowing your reflection into a corridor that never was pulling you back into the maze's embrace. Undeterred, Hermes attempts a loop run, a daring sprint that should return him to the entrance. Mainstream athletic treatises recount that only at a sustained speed of 12 stadia per breath could a winged runner outrun the wall's shifts. You feel your breath catch as he presses a feather-tipped foot to the bronze sandals, humming like tiny mandolins against the metal. Fringe speed mythologists, though, maintain that Hermes' personal best, clocked at 15 stadia per breath, recorded on a secret Olympian scroll under guard of Athena's acolytes. Historians still argue whether those metrics reflect genuine divine athleticism or symbolic hyperbole, celebrating Hermes' mercurial speed. As he nears the fourth corridor, a low stone buttress springs up an unseen obstacle, towering into his flight path. Hermes skids to a halt, sandal wing clipping the edge and sending sparks into the dim glow. 3 more jokes flash. Imagine him flailing wildly, arms like windmills. Picture a startled sparrow flitting past, its chirp echoing through the maze. Or a cyclops guard sighing. Again, with the unexpected obstacles, you bite back a laugh and shift your weight, feeling the buttress's cold stone pulse with mechanical intent. Hermes regroups, uncorks a small flask of scented oil mint for clarity, myrtle for agility, and rubs it on his sandal straps. You catch the herbaceous aroma, recalling tales of ritual anointments before divine races. Mainstream liturgical guides describe this as the Ponta Horaean rite, always to move a perfumed ceremony believed to lubricate both leather and luck. Fringe aroma ritualists, however, claim mint invoked Hermes' mother Maya's spring water blessings, granting ephemeral bursts of swiftness when corridors risked entanglement. Historians still argue whether scented anointments improved agile grace or simply added perfumed flair to performance. Boosted by oil and incantation, Hermes vaults that buttress in a single bound, landing in a narrow passage styled with labyrinth glyph tiles. You lean in to inspect the tiles' concentric swirls that match those in Section 2, their tessellations guiding winged pivots. Fringe glyph interpreters argue these tiles traced the flight paths of first birds. Hermes trained swift swallows, mapping eternal loops. Historians still argue whether labyrinth glyphs served as avian waypoints or aesthetic floor art. Panting Hermes reaches the culmination of his test, a circular clearing where the maze's shifting walls converge in a silent, rotating dance. He steps onto a mosaic ring depicting the zodiac, his reflection framed by 12 celestial symbols. Mainstream astrological chronicles note that when Mercury occupied its own sign, maze shifts, halted walls, stood still long enough for even a mortal to cross. You sense a hush, the labyrinth's pulse easing for a precious moment. Fringe astrolabyrinth. Scholars, however, claim the zodiac ring itself was a control panel stepping on certain glyphs, sent whisper commands to bronze ribs, realigning halls by planetary decree. Historians still argue whether zodiac arrays governed corridors or merely signaled cosmic synchrony. With the test complete, Hermes spirals skyward sandals, humming as he ascends out of the clearing and beyond the labyrinth's reach. You stand alone amid shifting corridors that already slink back into their default patterns. Your heart still races from his dervish run, mixing exhilaration and relief at surviving his trial. 3 final jokes drift. Imagine a mortal adventurer trying those sandals and promptly ending up on Olympus's doorstep. Picture a labyrinthian therapist diagnosing maze-induced vertigo, or think of a frustrated maze designer noticing his own twists and blurting, "That's not supposed to move." You smile despite yourself, knowing that once the god's trial ended, the labyrinth slept only to awaken when Hermes next tested its whims. As you step back toward the courtyard, lantern in hand, and thoughts swirling, carry with you the echo of winged hammers on bronze. The hiss of honey tests the tilt plate's clunk and the mint-scented sprint. In testing in winged sandals, the labyrinth proved as much a challenge to Hermes's pride as to any wanderer's wit. Each leap and landing taught him, if not humility, then a gleeful respect for the maze's mercurial heart. You slip around a sudden corner and stumble into a broad hall where bronze walls widen into an open atrium, torches dancing on polished pillars. And there, amid shifting shadows, stands a rumbling horned figure, an uninvited minotaur, its fur matted with bronze dust. Welcome to Uninvited Minotaurs and Guests, where Hermes's labyrinth proves so enticing that creatures not on the guest list wander in and sometimes even refuse to leave. You probably won't survive the shock of encountering a half-man, half-bull in bronze chambers without your breath catching, but lean in each unexpected visitor sows fresh chaos in corridors already alive with mischief. Mainstream mythographers note that early drafts of the maze, intended only for divine play, inadvertently attracted wild beasts from nearby groves. You watch as a lone stag once followed Hermes's glittering silver waypoints into the maze's heart, its antlers scraping ancient bronze panels in a startled echo. Historians still argue whether that stag's entry marked a cosmic endorsement of Hermes's design, or merely a hungry deer chasing moonlit reflections. Fringe labyrinth ecologists, however, claim that the maze's metallic heat mimicked volcanic soils, luring heat-seeking creatures such as scorpions, fiery salamanders, and even a solitary minotaur calf, born when a rogue bull wandered in under a lunar eclipse. They argue that these uninvited residents adapted to the maze's microclimate, carving secret burrows beneath sliding panels and forging symbiotic relationships with the shifting walls. Historians still argue whether these creatures learned to thrive in bronze corridors or remain legendary embellishments of cosmic bestiaries. You edge past a yawning minotaur that snorts in surprise, its breath misting in the cool corridor air. It stomps a hoof, rattling a concealed lever that redirects an entire hallway in a low groan. Three light jokes flicker in your mind. Picture Hermes handing the Minotaur a bronze complaint form. Imagine a confused centaur guest checking his reflection to ensure he's not lost. Or recall the time a cheeky satyr followed a silver glint only to find itself trapped in a mosaic-etched cul-de-sac. You stifle a laugh, conscious of the beast's solemn gaze. Across from the bovine sentinel, a troop of wayward satyrs, uninvited revelers, drawn by the maze's echoing acoustics, dance past a mirrored niche, whirling grapes, and casting wine-stained footprints on polished bronze. Mainstream rites, scholars record that Hermes's shifting acoustics once lured Dionysian followers into labyrinthic feasts, their laughter spurring further reconfigurations. Historians still argue whether those satyrs honored the labyrinth's spirit or merely vandalized its corridors in drunken glee. An ornate side chamber holds a lone phoenix feathers, aflame with residual forge sparks perched atop a pedestal of mosaic feathers. Fringe phoenix lore proponents claim the maze's forged bronze catalyzed the firebird's rebirth cycles, its ashes sealed in hidden urns to power enchanted pivot joints. Mainstream naturalists, skeptical, suggest the phoenix sightings were actually bright lizards reflecting torchlight off bronze scales. Historians still argue whether the firebird truly roamed Hermes's maze, or if eyewitness accounts conflated bioluminescent herpetofauna with mythical ornithology. In one dark alcove, a wizened crone in tattered robes, said to be the spirit of Daedalus's long-lost apprentice, whispers fragmented directions to lost travelers in exchange for small offerings of incense. Mainstream oral history projects record her as a guardian echo, an unintended side effect of the maze's mirrored acoustics trapping her final breath. Fringe ghost hunter chronicles maintain she's the maze's built-in safety valve, a spectral concierge programmed to guide the truly desperate. Historians still argue whether she was a real mortal who vanished within these walls, or a narrative device sprung from wanderers' imaginations. When a wandering minotaur calf tumbles into the satyr feast, Hermes himself appears cackling as he corrals the beast with a draught of ambrosial honey. You almost feel the warmth of his mischievous laughter ripple through the bronze ribs. Three final jokes waft through your senses. Envision the minotaur calf nibbling on shifting walls like spare fodder. Picture satyrs ducking as the phoenix lighting collapses, spilled sparks, or imagine the crone offering you spectral directions. Second left, fourth right, then straight, until you hear laughter only for the path to loop back 2 steps later. You bite your lip, muffling your laughter against the hall's hush. As you back away from the uninvited company, bulls, birds, and banished spirits alike, the maze's heart pulses around you. Each unexpected guest adds fresh layers of mischief, reminding you that even divine designs can't contain the wild whimsy of gods and beasts. And so the labyrinth lives on a living menagerie of mirrors, metal, and minotaurs, ever ready to welcome those clever enough to wander its gleaming corridors. You find yourself in a twisting chamber where the corridor walls converge into a narrow claustrophobic tunnel. The bronze panels overhead glint like restless insects, and your winged sandals, Hermes' prized gifts, chin-clad tight around your ankles. This is sandals malfunction, mid-maze, the moment when even divine footwear falters and sends the fleet messenger god stumbling into his own creation. You probably won't survive the mortifying spectacle of Hermes mid-trip without wincing for him, but lean in every spring's misfire reveals the maze's mischievous soul and the fragility of pride. Hermes takes flight with characteristic flair, sandals humming as feathers brush the bronze ceiling. Mainstream mythographers record that winged sandals Talaria first appeared in Hesiod's Theogony, granting wearers the ability to traverse earth, sea, and sky at unparalleled speed. You feel the history beneath your feet as though you tread a line stretching back to Homeric verses. Yet, as Hermes vaults over a sunken pillar, a single feather loosens, caught on a cyclopean rivet. His sandals falter mid-stride, and you hear a drawn-out scree as bronze scrapes leather. Fringe cobbler mythologists, however, claim the Talaria were woven from the wing fibers of harpy queens, each stitch imbued with ancient spite, making them prone to itching mishaps when corridors shift unexpectedly. They whisper that Hermes once cursed his own sandals after a workshop prank, ensuring each corridor held a built-in snag to humble his vanity. Historians still argue whether these cobbler tales reflect genuine divine curses or later mortals' attempts to explain syncopated sandal glitches. You wince as Hermes lands awkwardly, stumbling into the corridor's mid-riff. One winged sandal skids off his heel, sending him sliding across polished bronze like a runaway chariot wheel. 3 light jokes flicker through your mind. Picture a mortal trying on winged sandals and testing flight over the reflectorily slippery floor, only to faceplant spectacularly. Imagine a satyr clowning around in borrowed sandals, performing acrobatics until the wings detach mid-twirl. Or recall the time a pompous messenger tried to show off and ended up sliding into a secret lever, whereupon a concealed wall swung open to reveal the maze's lost snack pantry. You clench your teeth to stave off laughter, mindful that even giggles echo unbearably loud in these metal halls. Hermes scrambles to retrieve his errant sandal. You crouch, heart pounding, to help him, but as you reach out, the floor tilts beneath you, sending both of you careening toward a low bench inset in the wall. Mainstream architectural surveys of Dorian Greek temples note that many buildings featured sloped floors for ritual cleansing, runoff, a design repurposed here in the labyrinth for controlled disorientation. You feel the slope's subtle drag on your boots, a physical reminder that every feature in this maze doubles as a playful trap. Fringe environmental engineers, though, argue that these slopes were originally drainage systems for subterranean springs beneath Mount Selene, accidentally co-opted by Hermes's maze, and that water seeping through ancient channels subtly magnetized the bronze rails, causing sandals embedded with iron-flecked laces to jog loose at precise moments. Historians still argue whether hydraulic design influenced maze dynamics or if water tales emerged later to gild a good story. You help Hermes upright. He secures the displaced sandal's strap with a hasty knot, cursing under his breath, but flashing you a wry grin. 3 more jokes drift in your mind. Picture Hermes holding a finger-sized repair kit, complete with celestial thread and golden needles, pulling out a tiny hammer to reset every rivet. Imagine Hephaestus making a late-night cameo to chastise Hermes for mistreating divine footwear. Or consider the thought of a minotaur pausing mid-snort to gawk at feathered boots lying in a haphazard heap. You stifle a chuckle, glancing at the grizzled Cyclops Smith you half expect to step from the shadows and offer a spare rivet. With straps secured, Hermes resumes his sprint, but sandal wings now droop a little, threatening every graceful leap. He vaults forward, only to clip his heel on a low arch, tumbling into a side corridor that wasn't there seconds ago. Mainstream structural analyses identify such low arches, traverse bars, as load-bearing supports in Bronze Age Cretan palaces, often repurposed as low-clearance traps in subsequent labyrinth myths. You duck under the arch, testing the clearance, your head just brushing the rim as you scramble forward. Fringe mythic architects, however, argue these traverse bars were deliberately placed to remind gods and mortals alike that no one remains unflappable forever. They claim that each low arch was inscribed with tiny owl glyphs, symbols of Athena's foresight, hidden so that only the attentive could spot them and anticipate a stumbling block. Historians still argue whether these glyphs were functional markers for exit planning or poetic flourishes lodged in oral recitations. You and Hermes burst into a triangular chamber dimly lit by torch sconces. The walls here gleam with faint etchings of winding vines and tiny sandals, Hermes' own footprints immortalized by apprentices as both homage and practical record. Mainstream excavation reports from Spartan sanctuaries document similar vine-etched walls as decorative motifs symbolizing growth and renewal after ritual hardship. You brush a vine leaf carving, feeling its gentle relief beneath your thumb. Fringe record keepers, on the other hand, argue that these carvings formed a biography of Hermes's first 100 runs, each footprint representing a trial gone awry. Historians still argue whether vine motifs served decorative or autobiographical purposes. Hermes spots a low bench at the chamber's center and flops onto it with a dramatic groan. He tugs the sandal free and with a resigned grin hands it to you for inspection. Under torchlight, you see the rivet that snagged its head worn and proud, a testament to countless tests. You remove the stubborn feather tangled around it, inhaling the sandal's milky leather scent. 3 gentle jokes skim your mind. Recall the rumor that Hermes kept screwdriver-tipped sandals for emergencies. Imagine he stowed spare feathers in his caduceus staff. Or consider if he once tried wearing mortal boots and found their soles too predictable. You laugh quietly, glad for the brief respite. With sandal repaired, Hermes slides it back onto his foot, ponders the maze's next stretch, and gestures you onward. You rise together, sandal straps squeaking in the silence. As you follow him through shifting walls, you carry the warmth of shared embarrassment and the knowledge that even gods stumble. In this chamber, your pulse still races from falls, tilt plates, and stray rivets, each misstep a lesson in hubris and adaptation. As you exit the triangular room, torches flicker to reveal a fresh set of corridors, smooth, gleaming, and ready to test divine agility anew. Hermes flexes his repaired wing before tightening a final knot. You sense his amusement, knowing that in the maze of his own invention, malfunction is as integral as mastery. Each loose feather and dented rivet speaks to the labyrinth's living wit, a playful partner in divine athletics. With sandals rewinged and pride slightly dented, Hermes strides forward, ready for the next trial. His laughter echoes off bronze ribs as the walls shift behind you, guiding both god and guest deeper into the living puzzle. And as your footsteps fall in sync, one sound, two, sound, shifting, sound you realize in sandals malfunction, mid-maze, the true marvel isn't flawless flight, but the joy of flying through folly itself. You stride into a vast bronze-clad chamber where the air thickens with the scent of ozone and salt. Here, divine roadblocks and detours unfold as Zeus hurls crackling lightning bolts to fracture pathways, and Poseidon floods passages with seawater, a celestial reminder that even a god of mischief must contend with his peers' meddling. You probably won't survive the thrill of divine interventions without feeling your pulse charge like a captive thunderstorm. But lean in each electrified corridor and submerged route sparks fresh wonder and peril in Hermes' marvel of misdirection. A sudden flash of brilliant white sears the chamber's polished walls, followed by a resonant boom that rattles your teeth. Mainstream mythographers date this first lightning trial to the festival of Thargelia, when Zeus, displeased by Hermes' audacious maze, summoned a bolt through the skylight to scorch the northern corridor. You feel the residual heat radiating from a charred panel, its bronze bubbled and blackened like a fallen comet. Fringe storm ritual scholars, however, insist Zeus's bolt was channeled through a hidden fulgurite conduit, an archaic lightning rod carved by Hephaestus himself, directing celestial power into precise circuit breaks. Historians still argue whether labyrinth bolts served as divine warnings or as theatrical pyrotechnics engineered by cooperative smiths. As sparks fizzle from cracked seams, Hermes flits forward, sandals humming in defiance. He evades a cascade of molten rivets that peel from the ceiling, dancing atop shifting floor plates to avoid molten droplets. 3 light jokes flit through your mind. Imagine a mortal runner pointing a selfie stick at a live bolt for the perfect hat maze storm shot. Picture a disgruntled satyr, dismayed that even his horns get singed. Or recall Hermes texting lightning emojis to Zeus, LOL, nice one, bro. You stifle a grin, mindful that laughter echoes louder than thunder in these metal halls. Before you can catch your breath, a rumble beneath your feet signals a tidal surge. Poseidon's trident appears carved into a bronze relief, and instantly a torrent of seawater gushes from hidden spouts along the walls, flooding the passage to ankle height. You inhale the salty spray, tasting iodine on your tongue, and, feeling currents, tug at your sandals' feathered wings. Mainstream naturalistic accounts note that Aegean rainwater gathered in cisterns was repurposed for such trials, simulating ocean deluge under temple festivals. Fringe aquatic myth enthusiasts, though, argue that Poseidon conjured real seawater from underground springs tapped by magical aquifers, an engineered marvel of ancient hydroalchemy. Historians still argue whether water floods served practical corridor cleaning or genuine display of trident might. Hermes ducks under a rising wave, his cape billowing like a sail caught in storm winds. He triggers a hidden lever, raising a raised platform beneath your feet. The water drains in a swirling vortex, whisking away debris and leaving the floor gleaming as though freshly polished. You watch the eddy swirl bronze coins and scattered shells into a hidden trapdoor. 3 more jokes bubble in your mind. Envision a maze tourist frantically paddling through a flooded corridor wearing pool floaties. Picture a minotaur calf delighted by free fish snacks, or imagine Poseidon high-fiving a water sprite as it delivers the perfect flood. You bite your lip to suppress laughter, noting how even divine pranks brim with theatrical flair. With the atrium cleared, you sprint through a side corridor where wall panels slither aside to form a new pathway, Hermes' own countermeasure against static traps. Yet, as you run, a low rumble heralds another intervention. Zeus's eagle, perched on a molten bronze perch above, shrieks and flaps massive wings, triggering hidden sluices that vacuum air from the passage in powerful gusts. You shield your eyes as dust and pebbles spray past your sandals, knocking sparks from bronze thresholds. Mainstream ornithologists observe that temple eagles were trained to respond to lightning calls, serving as living signals for ritual enactments. Fringe aviary magicians maintain these eagles wore enchanted necklaces that amplified their calls into sonic wedges, carving gust corridors at will. Historians still argue whether eagle-induced winds were scripted avian theater or genuine weathercraft. You struggle forward, toes gripping a sloping ramp that tilts unexpectedly 1 foot higher than the other, forcing you to dance sideways to maintain your balance. Mainstream structural studies of labyrinth ramps reveal counterweighted panels calibrated to drop under winged weight, ensuring no runner gained too much momentum. You grunt as the tilt shifts beneath you, recalling how a mortal temple athlete once toppled spectacularly during opening ceremonies. Fringe physiological engineers, however, claim those ramps tested vestibular agility, conditioning, divine runners' inner ear, reflexes for unpredictability. Historians still argue whether tilting floors combined performance art and skill training, or simply amused maze designers. Through a narrow slit in the wall, you glimpse Hermes summoning a thunderbolt from Zeus's lightning rod, an act of divine diplomacy that pacifies the storm for the moment. He raises his caduceus, echoing an ancient treaty, paths shall shift, waters shall flow, but the maze remains our truce. You sense the tension ease as air returns and torches flicker back to steady flame. 3 final jokes flit at the edge of your thoughts. Imagine a peace treaty in the form of lightning emojis and water droplets exchanged on Olympus's group chat. Picture Zeus begrudgingly admitting, "Okay, fine, your maze isn't collapsing yet." Or recall Poseidon grumbling, "Next time we flood it with wine." You grin despite yourself, warmed by the bizarre camaraderie of rival gods. As divine interventions cease, you step into a final corridor, slick with dew and etched with caduceus graffiti, Hermes' signature marking contested ground. You run a fingertip along the brass emblem, tasting its salty, sweet residue of seawater and ozone. Mainstream graffiti studies note that temple scribes endorsed such markings to guide pilgrims through sacred precincts. Fringe labyrinth artists, though, contend these symbols invited future pranks, masked impersonators, swapping emblems to confuse even the god of boundaries. Historians still argue whether caduceus tags served wayfinding or perpetuated endless pranks. You emerge into a high-domed chamber where the walls stand dry and lit by serene moonlight. The riot of thunder, flood, and wind has quieted to a gentle whisper. Hermes lands beside you, sandals humming with residual spark, and nods in approval. "You weathered the storm," he murmurs. You exhale, heart still thundering, knowing that each divine roadblock and detour tested not just speed, but resilience, wit, and willingness to quip in the face of chaos. As you turn to continue awaiting Section 9's echoes and whispering walls, you carry in your chest the echoes of lightning's crack, the roar of flooding, and the whoosh of eagle gusts. The labyrinth's living trials have shown that its true power lies not only in metal and misdirection, but in the unpredictable whims of gods themselves. You press a palm against the bronze wall and pause, sensing vibrations pulsing like distant heartbeats. Here, echoes and whispering walls reveal the labyrinth's acoustic enchantments, where every footfall transforms into soft murmurs and layered voices guide or mislead wayfarers. You probably won't survive the uncanny chorus of reflected sound without shivers skittering down your spine. But lean in. Each echo carries both promise and pitfall in equal measure. At first, your footsteps produce nothing more than a faint plink on the polished bronze floor. Then plink, plink, plink. Those sounds return to you, slowed and multiplied, rebounding from hidden concave niches. Mainstream architectural treatises on Achaemenid temples note that concave bronze panels amplify sound between 300 and 1,000 hertz, the human voice's sweet spot to carry whispers clearly across long distances. You breathe in the torch smoke-tinged air as your plink ripples back in 3 staggered layers, like a conversation between present past and future selves. Historians still argue whether these echo chambers were built for courtroom surveillance or for meditative reflection on spoken oaths. Fringe psychoacoustic scholars, however, contend that the wall's whispering corridors were designed to induce suggestive hallucinations. Repeated echoes trick the brain into hearing phantom footsteps or distant voices nudging wanderers toward particular routes. They claim that when a corridor's echoes shift from gentle plink to soft hiss, it signals a secret detour opening elsewhere. Historians still argue whether whispering walls served pragmatic wayfinding or cultivated disorienting illusions to humble intruders. You step deeper into the hall and murmur a single word, echo, not expecting a reply. But it comes, echo, a surreal cascade that feels almost conversational. In a corner, you sight a small bronze whisper tube embedded in the wall, its narrow bore angled toward an unseen chamber. Mainstream recordings from Persian court whisper nets describe these tubes akin to mechanical stethoscopes used by clerks to eavesdrop on proceedings without betraying their presence. You cup your ear to the tube, heart fluttering, but hear only your own echo bouncing back, distorted and distant. Historians still argue whether whisper tubes formed a covert surveillance network or simply entertained curious pilgrims. 3 light jokes drift through your mind. Imagine a minotaur calf tiptoeing behind you, whispering, "This way," only to vanish when you turn. Picture a satyr prankster hiding in a whisper tube, spouting nonsense about secret snack rooms. Or consider Hermes himself popping out from an alcove, winking and whispering the labyrinth's punchline before sliding behind a shifting wall. You stifle a grin, mindful that laughter resonates twice as long in these whispering galleries. As you follow the corridor, every clang of your torch bracket, each tap against bronze returns as a stuttering rhythm, like a heartbeat, racing to catch up with itself. Mainstream acoustic engineers studying Persepolis's Hall of Echoing Mirrors measured reverberation times up to 4 seconds, an intentional design to instill solemn awe during royal ceremonies. You notice the torch's flicker synchronizes with the echo's decay, creating a ghostly strobe of light and sound that seems choreographed. Fringe ritual anthropologists argue that these echoes formed a living kata, a Zoroastrian sacred space where voices mingled with ancestral spirits, offering guidance in whispered counsel. Historians still argue whether echo chambers functioned as spiritual conduits or grandiose decorations. A little further, a pair of elongated bronze flutes jut from the wall, silent now. Mainstream historians identify these as murmurators' instruments once played by temple musicians to generate low drones that lulled audiences into trance before trials. You trace a fingertip along a flute's length, feeling its cool, hollow curve. Fringe musicologists, however, claim these murmurators were tuned to the labyrinth's shifting frequencies so that when walls moved, the flutes emitted mournful sighs, signaling new passages opening. Historians still argue whether flutes provided ritual ambiance or encoded acoustic blueprints of the maze's heart. The corridor splits into twin galleries, each lined with polished bronze bars spaced a hand's width apart. You slip your fingers between them, tapping a quick tap-tap. The return comes as a counter-rhythm tap. Tap-tap. Tap, offset by a single beat, as though the maze itself is keeping time with your curiosity. Mainstream studies in psychoacoustic feedback loops note that such delayed echoes can induce mild disorientation and anxiety, heightening awareness of surroundings. You feel your pulse quicken in response. Fringe behavioral psychologists suggest this rhythmic echo feedback served as a built-in lie detector. Honest footsteps sounded steady, while anxious hearts triggered stuttered echoes. Historians still argue whether echo patterns monitored truth or simply manipulated mood. In a widening chamber, you discover a mirrored alcove where a single whispered tube meets a reflective panel. As you speak, your voice bounces back, not only as echoes, but as a subtle harmonic overtone, an ethereal you that seems to answer even before your own echo arrives. Mainstream acoustics research calls this echo summation a resonance phenomenon, when direct and reflected waves overlap. You feel the uncanny sensation of two selves conversing. Fringe, mystic optics devotees assert that these overtones are the labyrinth's voice, whispering secrets of hidden doors and forgotten exits if you listen with enough intention. Historians still argue whether harmonic echoes conveyed encoded guidance or simply startled visitors into imaginative flights. Your torchlight flickers as you approach a final chamber where walls curve into a circular dome. Every sound you make is swallowed and returned as a rolling whoosh, like distant waves crashing upon unseen shores. Mainstream archaeologists liken this dome to the dead room in acoustic engineering, an intentional echo pit, isolating sound into a singular, rich resonance. You place both hands to your mouth and call maze. The resulting echo emerges as a deep maze that trails off into silent reverence. Fringe lore keepers, though, insist this dome houses the labyrinth's consciousness, a sentinel that responds only to names spoken with pure intent, granting safe passage to those whose voices it recognizes. Historians still argue whether the Echo Dome served practical acoustic tests or inspired whispered legends of living corridors. As you leave the echoing halls behind, stepping into a quiet side passage, you carry with you their lingering harmonies, the plink, the hiss, the whoosh. Each auditory imprint has guided and misled in equal measure, turning simple speech into sacred code. The whispering walls have spoken and will speak again, their voices woven into the labyrinth's metal sinews. And with each step toward Section 10's Apollo's sarcastic directions, remember, in this maze, your voice is both compass and cipher, echoing truths you may not yet be ready to hear. You step into a sunlit rotunda where carved bronze mirrors gleam like golden suns embedded in the walls. At its center stands a marble pedestal topped with a laurel wreath and a gilded staff. Apollo's sarcastic directions, the stage for the sun, God's wry commentary as he mischievously guides wanderers through the maze. You probably won't survive the sting of his barbed advice without blushing, but lean in each pronouncement reflects Apollo's vanity and humor, cutting through confusion with bright, scathing wit. A deep voice echoes from above, "Ah, mortal steps, once more, into confusion left." You say, "How quaint." Mainstream mythographers record that Apollo's voice, said to emanate from a network of concealed bronze tubes, was calibrated to a resonant C major, the clearest tone in Greek acoustics, ensuring his words carried without distortion. You hear the crispness of his syllables, each one chiming like a temple bell. Fringe performance theorists, however, insist those tubes doubled as pneumatic organs. Guests claim to hear faint flute harmonies beneath Apollo's jibe, suggesting hidden melodies guided by temple musicians. Historians still argue whether Apollo's voice was purely divine or aided by cunning engineers. Stepping forward, you find a small inscribed plaque at eye level. Turn right into the fire pit for a cozy surprise. You follow the arrow only to find yourself before a sealed bronze door etched with flaming tendrils. Mainstream archaeological records note such fire pit chambers were used for ceremonial burnings, not passageways, their doors long sealed by decree. You taste the faint scorch of embers sealed behind the metal, feeling a shiver of heat. Fringe ritualists claim Apollo's sarcastic direction was a test of faith. Only those brave enough to knock thrice would find an alternative escape hatch. Historians still argue whether the fire pit joke was a genuine trial or simply a temple prank gone legendary. A second voice, lighter teasing, drifts down the corridor. Forward, of course, toward the endless loop. Who doesn't love déjà vu? Mainstream linguistic studies of Hermes's Labyrinth inscriptions reveal sly use of Homeric irony, contrasting direct commands with impossible paths. You step ahead expecting a straight corridor, but walls shift into a perfect circle, looping you back to the rotunda's entrance. Fringe semiotic analysts, however, propose these circular loops served as cognitive reset zones, erasing short-term memory to prolong disorientation. Historians still argue whether looping corridors were true memory traps or dramatic devices to humble hubris. Laughing Apollo chides, "You're welcome to circle until autumn." Plenty of time to enjoy the view. 3 light jokes flicker in your mind. Imagine a weary traveler folding picnic blankets in the loop, expecting a cozy lunch break. Picture a satyr setting up a lemonade stand mid-corridor, or recall rumors of a ghostly snack cart drifting through offering ambrosia-flavored popcorn. You stifle a grin, mindful that even humor here echoes with uncanny timing. Ahead, a bronze relief panel depicts Apollo with an upturned brow and pointed finger. Beneath it, lettering reads, "Seek the footlight flicker at Challenge 5." Mainstream architectural scholars confirm that footlights, small oil lamps, set low along the floor, were used in amphitheaters to mark performance edges. Here, they flash in an irregular pattern, flick, flick, pause, flick, flick. You crouch to watch, counting pulses like Morse code. Fringe cryptographers, however, argue the flickers form a simple binary map: left, left, right, left, a hidden guide to the next junction. Historians still argue whether footlight codes were intended navigation aids or artistic flourishes repurposed by maze lore. You follow the code left, left, right, left, only to find a dead end lined with mirrored panels. As you gaze at your reflection, Apollo's voice sighs, staring contest again. Splendid use of time. Mainstream psychological studies note that mirrored reflections in mazes induce self-observation, reinforcing introspection and discouraging panic. You see yourself, shoulders hunched, eyes darting, and feel a flush of self-consciousness. Fringe psychosocial experts, though, claim mirrored dead ends serve to test one's resolve. Those who lingered too long would be subject to subtle wall shifts that delayed exits further. Historians still argue whether mirrored chambers encouraged self-reflection or cruel stalling tactics. Suddenly, a hidden panel slides open under your hand, revealing a narrow stair winding upward. Apollo's voice trills, "Use the stairs." Climbing builds character, or so they say. Mainstream structural analyses observe that spiral staircases were rare in Bronze Age Greek buildings, but found in later Hellenistic fortifications for defense. Here, they offer a vertical escape, a simple solution to horizontal loops. You begin your ascent, noting the worn handrail etched with tiny laurel leaves, a symbol of Apollo's domain. Fringe glyph interpretation. Enthusiasts argue the laurel carvings form a subtle breadcrumb trail. Follow the leaves' orientation to navigate branching staircases. Historians still argue whether laurel markers served practical wayfinding or ritual homage. Reaching the top, you emerge into a domed antechamber where a mosaic frieze portrays Apollo guiding lost travelers. Under each figure, an inscription reads, "I pointed, you veered, well done." A wry joke the figures all face away from the exit. Mainstream mosaic experts date the frieze to post-Achaemenid restorations, suggesting temple sculptors added playful imagery centuries after Hermes built the maze. You trace a figure's stance, arm extended, foot poised, yet its gaze avoids the exit arch. Fringe art historians argue this dissonance acted as a meta-commentary on free will. Visitors must choose to follow divine guidance or trust their own path. Historians still argue whether the frieze was intended as sincere aid or satirical critique. At the chamber's far end, a final bronze mirror bears a single word etched in gold leaf, trust. You step before it, meeting your reflection head on. Apollo's voice murmurs softly, almost kindly. At long last, you learn. Mainstream mythic interpretations suggest the mirror served as a moral climax. Trusting oneself was the key to exit. You inhale deeply, summoning resolve. Fringe ethical philosophers, however, claim the mirror's command tests obedience to divine authority, prompting debate on servility versus self-direction. Historians still argue whether trust marked a genuine philosophical lesson or gilded manipulation. With newfound confidence, you turn away from the mirror and find the next corridor bathed in warm sunlight, its bronze surfaces etched with caduceus reliefs pointing the way. Hermes' labyrinth opens before you once more, each directive a blend of genuine guidance and sharp jest. Apollo's sarcastic directions have both guided and goaded you, weaving wisdom and whimsy into every glint of bronze. As you stride forward, ready for Athena's unsolicited advice in Section 11, carry with you the echo of Apollo's barbs. Trust the maze. Trust your steps. But always trust yourself. Above all, you emerge into a high-ceilinged gallery lined with bronze reliefs of owl-feathered helmets and shield boss emblems, the signature precinct of Athena's unsolicited advice. Here, the goddess of wisdom presides not with horns or thunderbolts, but with cool counsel that cuts through labyrinthine confusion like a sharpened spear. You probably won't survive her blunt strategic insights without bristling at her precision, but lean in. Each directive is a lesson in cunning strategy and the art of war with walls. A hush falls as Athena's voice rings out clear as a bell. First, map the center. All paths radiate outward. Center holds the clue. Mainstream scholars of Greek rhetoric note that Athena's aphorisms often employ triadic structure, three concise directives that lodge in memory. You inhale the faint scent of burning olive oil, her sacred offering, drifting from phosphorescent lampstands shaped like owl talons. Fringe. Ritual linguists, however, argue those lamps once flickered in coded sequences, long to underscore each syllable of divine counsel, turning light into mnemonic flash in the gallery's dim. Historians still argue whether these lamp signals guided pilgrims or simply dramatized her pronouncements. Heeding her first admonition, you pivot toward a circular mosaic at the gallery's heart, a stylized hub inlaid with concentric bands of polished bronze and lapis. Mainstream archaeological surveys confirm these centroid mosaics anchored public spaces in Athenian fora, offering orientation points for wandering crowds. You crouch, brushing marble fragments off the outer ring, and study engraved arrows that radiate in 12 directions. Fringe geometric theorists, though, posit the 12 arrows correspond to zodiac houses linking spatial strategy to cosmic alignment. Historians still argue whether Athena's gallery mapped city planning or celestial cartography. Athena's voice returns crisp with approval. Second favor the left. Labyrinths twist right when pride blinds the runner. You glance down the 12 corridors sprouting from the mosaic 6 on your left, 6 on your right. You feel a flicker of hesitation, 6 of each, but recall her counsel and choose the leftmost arch. Mainstream pathfinding studies observe that a simple bias, always turn left, solves many mazes by hugging walls, a heuristic even toddlers use. You press your hand to the left-hand wall, its bronze smooth, and follow its curve into narrowing corridors. Fringe cognitive psychologists, however, caution that strict wall hugging can trap you in loops when corridors reconnect unexpectedly. They suggest mixing heuristics alternate left and right to avoid circular dead ends. Historians still argue whether ancient wayfarers followed rigid rules or trusted shapeless instincts in labyrinths. Your chosen corridor bears subtle owl emblems, tiny reliefs, half hidden in panel seams. Mainstream numismatic evidence shows that owl symbols marked Athena's shrines and civic precincts, signifying safe havens. You trace a series of 4 owls in a downward sloping passage and realize they trace a descent beneath shifting walls. 3 light jokes flit through your mind. Imagine following owl icons, only to find Athena herself, perched on a bronze bracket, watching you. Picture a minotaur calf, squawking like an owl in jest, or recall a satyr misreading owl hieroglyphs as hoot, if lost here, a prank from whispered lore. You grin mindful that even humor here bears subtle wisdom. Athena's tone shifts firm, yet encouraging. Third, listen to walls. They murmur truth if you pause. You halt in your tracks and still your breathing, letting torch light slacken. Faintly you hear a soft whoom, the telltale shift of a pivoting panel behind your left shoulder. You pivot and spy a seam sliding into a new notch, revealing a slender shaft lined with cuneiform marks. Proceed 2 steps, then climb. Mainstream epigraphic studies note that hidden cuneiform-guided priests through temple labyrinths, a tradition Athena seems to continue. Fringe acoustic runic scholars, however, assert that the marks emitted resonant overtones when walls moved, sounding subtle musical notes as oral breadcrumbs. Historians still argue whether whispering runes guided feet or delighted ears. Heeding the wall's whisper, you step 2 precise paces, then locate a narrow bronze ladder mounted flush with the panel. Its rungs ring softly under your grip. Climbing, you feel bronze warmth under your palms. Above, a trapdoor swings open onto a spiral ramp of marble inlaid with silver stars. Mainstream architectural treatises observe spiral ramps in Greek sanctuaries, often led to clerestory windows, letting in sacred light. You ascend the ramp's gentle incline, easing your breath, and emerge beneath a domed alcove where Athena awaits, spectral in her shining aegis. Her voice resonates from every reflective facet. Well done. You listened. Now reflect. She gestures to a circular mirror inset in the dome's apex. You gaze upward. Your reflection meets a dozen inverted echoes, each flickering in torchlight. Mainstream anthropological accounts describe reflective ceilings in vaulted halls, used for ritual self-examination. You watch your multiple selves shimmer, guarded observer, determined pilgrim, curious guest. Fringe psychotheologians claim such reflections induce eidetic recall, sharpening memory for subsequent trials. Historians still argue whether mirrored ceilings served ritual or rumination. With a final decree, Athena intones trust not just sight nor sound, but balance all senses, mind, body, heart. You touch your palm to your chest, feeling the rhythm of your pulse. You place your other hand on the maze's cool bronze wall and listen to its faint hum. You glance skyward through a lattice window. Flickers of starfire as night deepens and taste incense still clinging to the air. 3 light jokes dance in your mind. Imagine Athena scribbling these maxims on a chalkboard above every schoolboy's desk. Picture Hermes rolling his eyes at her over-precise lessons, or recall Artemis laughing at both of them while hunting in the wilderness. You smile, knowing the maze's greatest teacher is wit and wisdom entwined. As you descend the silver-starred ramp back into the labyrinth's winding arteries, you carry Athena's counsel like a sharpened blade. Map the center favor left, listen to walls, and blend senses into strategy. Her unsolicited advice, though, delivered with cutting clarity, has armed you with the tools to navigate divine trickery and metal mischief alike. Ahead lies Apollo's sarcastic directions, and beyond that, more labyrinth trials. But for now, you walk with balanced step and keen mind, guided by the goddess's unasked wisdom. You slip into a hush-lit corridor where the bronze walls taper inward, their surfaces engraved with intertwined winged sandals and caduceus motifs. This is chasing illusory exits, where every promising doorway dissolves into solid bronze just as you reach for the handle, an endless tease that tests your resolve and sharpens your wits. You probably won't survive the creeping frustration of doors that vanish mid-grasp without your heart thumping like a trapped bird. But lean in. Each illusion is a lesson in patience, perception, and the fine art of discerning truth from trickery. Your first attempt seems straightforward. A polished door, framed in silver inlay, glows ahead, its handle engraved with an arrow pointing outward. You stride forward, palm outstretched, but at the last moment, the door's surface ripples like molten metal and solidifies into a seamless wall. Mainstream maze scholars liken these false exits to ancient Greek parody theater moments designed to provoke laughter and humility. Fringe illusion engineers, however, insist they were crafted with electrum-infused bronze, enabling panels to flex and lock on spoken commands, creating the uncanny melt-and-freeze effect. Historians still argue whether these illusions relied on divine magic or ingenious metallurgy. As you step back, you notice a faint seam in the floor, a narrow channel running parallel to the exit wall. You crouch to peer inside and glimpse a sliver of torchlight from a hidden passage. Encouraged, you trace the seam with a fingertip, uncovering a spring-loaded latch concealed beneath a bronze fillet. 3 light jokes flit through your mind. Imagine the next traveler prying at the wall, only to have the secret passage spit them back into the labyrinth's heart. Picture Hermes chuckling as he watches guests practice acrobatics to find the latch. Or recall rumors that Daedalus himself once first discovered this trick and promptly got lost anyway. You stifle a grin, feeling both clever and vexed. You slip through the narrow gap and emerge into a small chamber lined with mirrors that distort your reflection, elongating your arms, shrinking your torso, as though the maze mocks your self-image. Mainstream psychological studies on mirror rooms confirm they induce disorientation and self-doubt. You pinch your upper arm to ground yourself, then press onward toward an arched doorway. Fringe psychoanalytic theorists, though, argue that distorted mirrors force introspection by confronting warped self-images. Wanderers shed ego attachments and open to genuine insight. Historians still argue whether mirror rooms served theatrical shock or spiritual cleansing. Through the arched doorway, you find a corridor that ends in a shallow pit, a classic booby-trapped exit. Mainstream architectural treatises note these pits were often just deep enough to jolt, but not harm. You peer over the edge, toes curling at the drop. Taking a careful step back, You grab a length of braided cord from your belt, an improvisation likely foreign to Hermes' design. Fringe survivalists, however, claim that braided cords were standard issue for initiates, enabling them to rappel into hidden lower levels. Historians still argue whether such gear was ever distributed or remains a modern infographic. Retracing your steps, you spy a small inscription on the wall in faint cuneiform. Seek the silent threshold where no echo replies. You pause, crouch, and click your tongue once. No echo returns. Mainstream epigraphers confirm that unechoing spots, dead zones, exist where sound waves cancel out, identifiable in acoustic surveys. You step into the silent patch and feel a gentle hum in your bones as walls shift, revealing a narrow jam. 3 jokes bubble up. Imagine someone shouting commands only to receive cosmic radio silence. Picture a satyr whispering echoed gossip to find only muted walls, or recall Hermes himself hiding in the silence, eavesdropping on frustrated runners. You grin at the subtle jest. Beyond the silent threshold, you face a pair of doors, one golden, one bronze, without inscriptions or glints to guide you. You hesitate. Mainstream maze theory warns against color-biased choices. Gold can blind the eye. Bronze can blend with walls. You close your eyes, take a steadying breath, and reach for the bronze door, trusting substance over shine. Fringe. Cognitive bias researchers, however, assert that forced choices like this prime decision fatigue, leading explorers to develop true north instincts in mazes. Historians still argue whether such color tests were pedagogical or mere pranks. The bronze door swings open smoothly, revealing a steep spiral stair descending into darkness. You exhale in relief, glancing back to see the golden door, now absent, its frame seamlessly melded into the wall. Mainstream structural analysts note these vanishing doors used counterweighted panels to retract into niches. You test the threshold, no handle, no seam, just cold bronze continuity. Fringe fabrication experts, though, claim these panels were spring-hinged and code-locked, accessible only when a hidden group of cuneiform symbols was recited aloud. Historians still argue whether voice-activated doors existed or emerged as later legend. Descending the spiral, you feel time warp. Each step feels both hastened and lengthened. Finally, you reach a low, squat doorway, leading back to the Labyrinth's main annex. Before you cross the threshold, you glance over your shoulder. The spiral stair has vanished into the floor, replaced by a solid slab. 3 final jokes drift through your thoughts. Imagine a next traveler setting a breadcrumb trail, only to find the whole stair evaporated. Picture a minotaur calf sighing, "Not again," as it drops into the pit, or recall Hermes leaving a note by the vanished steps, "Be back soon, got lost. Myself." You chuckle, appreciating the maze's perpetual sense of humor. As you step through the doorway, corridors realign behind you, erasing all traces of your detours. The path ahead glows with fresh torchlight, a silent invitation to proceed. In chasing illusory exits, you learn that patience, observation, and a dash of creativity turn illusions into opportunities. The maze's ever-shifting cast of doors and echoes tested your resolve, but each vanished exit honed your instincts. Carry these lessons forward as you enter Section 13's Dining at the Center Cafe, where yet another curve awaits and perhaps a much-needed snack. You step into a vaulted dining hall at the maze's exact center, where a long bronze table glints under torchlight, its surface engraved with concentric rings echoing the labyrinth's own spirals. Here, dining at the Center Cafe unfolds a mythical bistro, where diners sample minotaur stew and satyr wine while walls pulse with warmth and laughter. You probably won't survive the aroma of spiced meats and simmering broths without your stomach rumbling in solidarity, but lean in each bite is both sustenance and part of the maze's grand buffet of misdirection. A steaming cauldron sits enthroned on a raised platform, bronze ladle poised as though awaiting a divine spoon. Mainstream gastronomers note that communal feasting in ancient Greek context often occurred at symposia, where shared cups and platters reinforced social bonds. You watch an attendant ladle thick herb-flecked stew into bronze bowls. The recipe claimed to date back to Minoan Crete, infused with wild thyme and goat's milk cheese. You inhale the heady scent, savory tang, tempered by wood smoke and a whisper of oregano. Fringe culinary folklorists, however, insist the stew contains minotaur marrow, harvested from a calf born in lunar tide labyrinth pits, said to impart heightened dream viscosity. Historians still argue whether such marrow ever graced mortal kitchens or remains a fanciful garnish of oral tradition. Rows of stout benches flank the table, each set with 2 ceramic goblets filled with a deep crimson liquid. Mainstream viticultural records trace labyrinth wine to vineyards near Naxos, fermented in amphorae, coated with beeswax, and perfumed with wild rose petals. You lift a goblet to your lips, tasting wine's soft tannins and a floral undercurrent that clings to your cheeks. Fringe ONO-philes, though claim labyrinth vintages were aged in hidden subterranean cellars, carved into obsidian rock, where volcanic heat arcs hastened fermentation, producing a wine that glowed faintly in moonlit halls. Historians still argue whether subterranean aging was ever practiced or emerged as post-labyrinth legend. Seated nearby, a satyr duo clinks goblets, cheeks flushed with early indulgence. One slurps a chunk of lamb brisket, mid-sentence, lamenting, "They never told me vine snails were part of the menu." You lean closer. Vine snails, escargot, marinated in olive oil, and laurel are indeed laid on small plates, carved into the table's outer ring. Mainstream archaeological digs on Crete uncovered snail shells in palace kitchens, confirming escargot's place in Bronze Age diets. You pick up a snail with a slender bronze pick, noting its tender meat and subtle herbal brine. Fringe gastropod enthusiasts, however, argue that labyrinth snails were bred on bronze leaves, literally raised on sculpted foliage cast on plates, imbuing them with metallic notes. Historians still argue whether snail farming took place in labyrinthine kitchens or remains clever conjecture. At one end of the table, a small brazier emits curling smoke, atop which sits a clay pot of quinoa-like seeds. Labyrinth grain, locals call it. Mainstream anthropologists liken this grain to ancient Greek, spelt roasted for added crunch. You scoop a handful and chew thoughtfully, nutty, toasty, with a whisper of honey. Fringe paleo-ethnobotanists, though, claim labyrinth grain was a now extinct hybrid raised in subterranean groves, its kernels infused with metallic oxide traces that gave seeds a subtle shimmer. Historians still argue whether labyrinth grain ever sprouted in real fields or grew only in storytellers' imaginations. Between mouthfuls, you notice a brazier-warmed plate of Minotaur stew fritters, crispy dumplings stuffed with leftover stew and drizzled in sage-infused honey. Mainstream culinary texts reference fried fritters in Hellenistic banquets, prized for repurposing stew scraps into palate-pleasing morsels. You bite into one golden brown shell, yielding to rich, savory, center-sweet herb notes dancing on your tongue. Fringe kitchen alchemists, however, insist these fritters contain microscopic bronze shavings, accidents from ladle scrapes, imbuing a faint metallic tang meant to remind diners they dine within a foraging masterpiece. Historians still argue whether bronze tang fritters ever crossed ancient menus or remain gastronomic gossip. A server passes with a tray of labyrinth lament pastries, flaky, phyllo pockets filled with poppy seed paste and drizzled in rosewater syrup. Mainstream dessert historians link such sweets to early Byzantine traditions, merging Eastern rosewater with Greek poppy seeds. You select one and taste its delicate layers and perfumed sweetness. Fringe pastry mystics claim the lament paste induces vivid dreams of maze corridors, a hunger dream trace of the labyrinth's memory. Historians still argue whether these pastries carried ritual dream induction properties or served simply as sweet endings. Amid the feast, you glimpse a stone dish of dodge-the-walls olives, small dark fruit, marinated in garlic and spice. Mainstream botanical studies note that ancient olives were sometimes cured in brine with wild bay leaves for flavor. You pop one into your mouth, salty, sharp, with a garlic-tinged finish. Fringe olive lore keepers, though, maintain these olives were never meant to be eaten. Their maze guards consuming them ensures walls shift thrice as fast for the eater. Historians still argue whether labyrinth olives served culinary or cryptographic functions. As you savor your stew, Hermes swoops in on feathered sandals, scooping a spoonful with theatrical flourish. He raises an eyebrow and quips in your ear, spicy enough to jolt the wings. Three light jokes earworm your mind. Imagine a minotaur buffoon accidentally swallowing a fritter and bursting into a dance. Picture Daedalus's ghost taste testing with critical nods. Or consider Athena dropping by to critique the olive's cure time. You chuckle softly the maze's soft hum, complimenting clinks and murmurs. Apollo's voice drifts from bronze speakers overhead. Try the labyrinthine latte next infused with honey brewed on obsidian embers. You glance at a small stone urn labeled Mystery Brew, steam swirling in forensic spirals above it. Mainstream beverage historians draw parallels to Greek-spiced coffees, cinnamon and clove mixed in boiled water. Fringe barista mythos. Purists claim labyrinth lattes used ionized water from the echo chamber's mist, charging each cup with lingering harmonics. Historians still argue whether such mystical brews ever warmed ancient hands or emerged in post-labyrinth lore. As conversation swirls, minotaurs debating stew consistency satyrs, lamenting vanished grapes, and a single phoenix perched atop a nearby brazier, dipping its beak in grape juice. You realize the cafe is both oasis and crucible. Mainstream sociological insights note communal feasting in liminal spaces bind strangers through shared sustenance and trial. You feel camaraderie bloom with fellow diners, each shifting labyrinth's strain, soothed by savory morsels. Fringe communal mythologists, however, assert the cafe acts as a narrative nexus. Each patron's tale woven into the maze's living mythos, their stories bubbling into broth. Historians still argue whether labyrinth cafes served as social leveling grounds or mere mythic set pieces. As torchlight softens and laughter ripples, you rise, spoon in hand, bowl drained. Hermes tips a leftover fritter, your way winking fuel up for Section 14's Daedalus's ghost. You pocket the fritter, its warmth reassuring in your palm. You inhale deeply, savoring smoke spice honey and laughter essence distilled from metal and memory. With belly and spirit nourished, you step away from the table's spiral center, the cafe's aromas fading into corridor hush. Each taste has been a compass, herb, honey, olive, and echo, guiding you through misdirection and delight. Dining at the Center Cafe is more than a pause. It's a ritual of restoration laughter and story-essential fuel for the winding path ahead. You slip through a narrow arch into a shadowed alcove where the torchlight dims and the air grows heavy with quiet. Here, encountering Daedalus's ghost unfolds. The legendary craftsman's restless spirit haunts a labyrinth wing he once built, offering cryptic counsel in the flicker of a torch and stirring memories of tool and timber. You probably won't survive the chill of a master artisan's unfinished business without goose flesh rising on your skin, but lean in. Every whisper and echo carries the weight of genius undone. As you step inside, the floor's mosaic pattern shifts beneath your feet, rearranging itself into the shape of soaring wings, a silent salute to the craftsman's greatest mistake. Mainstream classical sources place Daedalus's workshop in Crete during Minos's reign, where he first designed the labyrinth for King Minos to imprison the Minotaur. You sense that ancient pulse beneath the bronze panels, as though the maze's very sinews remember Daedalus's hand. Fringe, labyrinth folk tales, however, insist Daedalus encoded secret runic signatures into each corridor, little engravings, only visible by candle smoke tracing. Historians still argue whether these concealed marks ever existed or were later scribbled by fanciful map-makers seeking treasure. A cool breeze skims your neck, though no door stands open. You whirl around, torch raised, and catch a fleeting silhouette in a mirrored niche, a tall figure draped in soot-streaked leathers, hammer at his side, face half veiled by a workshop apron. You blink, and he is gone. Mainstream archaeological work at Knossos uncovered a smithing enclave adjacent to Daedalus's reputed quarters, complete with charcoal deposits and metal scraps. It's plausible his forge's ghost flickers where heat once blazed. Fringe psycho-spiritual researchers, though, claim that ghostly sighting arises from residual stone memory materials, absorbing emotion and replaying it when touched by the right frequency. Historians still argue whether Daedalus's ghost is a true haunting or a psychosensory artifact of design. You edge forward, tracing your fingers along a bronze workbench embedded in the wall, polished smooth by centuries of hammer and chisel. 3 light jokes bubble up. Imagine Daedalus's ghost sighing, "A bit more polish, please." Picture him scolding apprentices in spectral rumble. You call this a dovetail, or recall a rumor that his spirit lingers to critique every modern DIY project on YouTube. You suppress a grin, mindful that even humor here ripples across time. At the end of the alcove, a low-hung brazier emits faint sparks, above which hovers a faint glow, forming the outline of Daedalus's schematic star charts, spiral diagrams, and wing blueprints. Mainstream papyrus fragments reference Daedalus's treatise on sacred geometry, where he compared a labyrinth's curves to the spiral arms of galaxies, an astoundingly modern metaphor in an ancient context. The glowing sketches drift in smoky air, then vanish as you lean close. Fringe astrocraft mythologists claim he learned celestial mapping from star gnomes beneath Crete's caverns, tiny miners of cosmic dust bestowing his labyrinth with astral alignments. Historians still argue whether star maze correlations stem from Daedalus's insight or later astrological interpolation. You pause before a concealed door half veiled in ivy-shaped relief. Etched into its frame is the faint inscription, If you would free the mind, unhinge the frame. Mainstream epigraphers note that such maxims often accompanied workshop portals, reminding artisans to question constraints. You press your palm to the engraving, feeling a pulse of cold bronze, and the door swings open to reveal a workshop-like chamber. Scattered tools, broken molds, and half-carved mirror fragments lie on dusty benches. A solitary hammer stands upright on a worktable head, balanced on its handle, as though awaiting the craftsman's grip. You lift it gently, astonished at its weight. Bronze, so dense, it hums with latent tension. Fringe, metallurgical lore, contends this hammer was cast from the same ingot Daedalus used for the Minotaur's cage, imbuing it with the power to reshape fate itself. Historians still argue whether such mythic provenance can be reconciled with metal analyses that show varied alloy compositions. From the shadows, a soft voice murmurs, "You seek the heart of creation, yet fear the cost." You spin torch trembling and see Daedalus's ghost leaning over a half-formed mirror embossed with a labyrinth's outline. The apparition points a spectral finger at the mirror's center, then at your chest, an unspoken riddle. Mainstream mythic psychology interprets Daedalus's mirror as a device for self-realization, facing one's own labyrinth within. Fringe psychocraft analysts argue these mirror encounters trigger eidetic labyrinth dreams, where dreamers solve puzzles in sleep-bridging mortal and divine cognition. Historians still argue whether mirror visions served therapeutic ends or merely enriched lore. Gathering courage, you step forward and trace the labyrinth outline on the mirror's surface. Instantly, the ghost vanishes in a swirl of bronze sparks. In his place, the mirror's edges slide inward, forming a narrow corridor bathed in gentle golden light. 3 final jokes drift in your mind. Imagine Daedalus's ghost complaining, "Always the mirrors and mazes. Where's the woodworking?" Picture him drifting to a modern hardware store, clutching a blueprint and muttering, "Need more hinges." Or consider the notion of him hopping onto a YouTube tutorial to update his wing blueprint for better takeoff. You chuckle softly, heart racing, with exhilaration at the puzzle's next turn. You step through the mirror portal and find yourself rising on a spiral ramp lined with floating sawdust and cuneiform glyphs. The ramp's slow ascent hums underfoot, guiding you toward a glowing bronze relief of Daedalus's final workshop, where the ghost's voice whispers, "Forge ahead, freedom awaits." As you climb corridors below, shift and settle, sealing the ghost's workshop once more. Emerging back into the labyrinth's main artery, you carry in your mind the echo of hammer strikes, whispered blueprints, and a craftsman's unfinished longing. In encountering Daedalus's ghost, you learn that genius can haunt its own creation, and that true escape may lie in embracing both craft and courage. Ahead lies trickery in the turning halls, where the maze's last illusions await. But for now you stride onward, heart alight with ancient inspiration. You step into a broad chamber where the bronze walls bend and curve in an ever-tightening spiral, each turn more confounding than the last. Here, trickery in the turning halls unfolds the maze's most devious illusions, where smug confidence meets hidden traps, and every pivot demands vigilance. You probably won't survive the dizzying sleight of hand of shifting corridors without your head spinning, but lean in each cunning twist reveals the labyrinth's playful cruelty and Hermes' mastery of misdirection. At first, the hall appears to spiral steadily to the right, the floor's concentric grooves guiding your feet along a predictable path. Mainstream scholars note that classic Greek spiral motifs often symbolize journey and return, a design echoed in labyrinthic sanctuaries from Knossos to Delphi. You follow the grooves, expecting a gentle descent, only to find the walls suddenly pivot inward at a 120-degree angle. No warning, no seam, sending you careening sideways. 3 light jokes flick through your mind. Imagine a mortal runner giving the walls a friendly tap and being shushed in perfect silence. Picture a confounded satyr who, after 3 turns, still insists he's moving forward. Or recall Hermes himself slipping mid-pivot and letting out a sheepish whistle. You stifle a grin, tiny clanks echoing in the hush. You press a palm to the wall where the pivot occurred, feeling a faint hum as hidden gears shift. Mainstream archaeological surveys of Aegean fortresses uncovered pivot hinge technology using bronze bearings lubricated with olive oil, a practical innovation you suspect underlies these illusions. Fringe mechanical mythographers, however, claim the hinges were enchanted with wind spirit whispers, causing them to move only when the echo of footfalls matched a secret rhythm. Historians still argue whether the turning halls relied on mortal ingenuity or divine craft. Reorienting yourself, you spy a slender corridor branching off to the left, its floor tiles inlaid with hoof-print motifs. You step in, noting the prints match those of a minotaur calf. Surely a cheeky callback to Section 6's uninvited guests. 3 further jokes tease your thoughts. Imagine the calf returning to polish its prints for posterity. Picture Daedalus's ghost chuckling as you follow hoofprints deeper, or envision Hermes planting phantom prints on your own shoes overnight. You shake off the amusement and follow the hoofprints, feeling a surge of playful defiance. The hoofprint corridor narrows before spilling into a circular room where 4 bronze doors stand equidistant. Each door bears a different emblem: a wing, a snake, a lyre, and a lightning bolt. Mainstream labyrinth texts cite emblemic choices as mnemonic levers. Wandering seekers would learn to associate symbols with trial types: speed, stealth, music, and storm. You ponder your choice. Wing seems tempting, echoing your sandals. Snake evokes silence. Lyre suggests harmony. Bolt hints at chaos. Fringe symbol theorists argue these emblems form a secret code. Read in the order. Hermes' sandals fell mid-trip, Section 7. They unlock the true exit. Historians still argue whether guests memorized fall orders or simply guessed by whim. Trusting your instincts, you choose the lyre door. It swings open to reveal a narrow spiral staircase, each step carved like harp strings. You ascend footsteps echoing in melodic chimes. Mainstream acoustic engineers note that string-shaped stairs could act as simple lithophones, each step producing a distinct note guiding ascents in tune. You hum along to the rising scale, feeling a momentary harmony until you near the top, and the final step collapses beneath your weight, swiveling back to the chamber below. You tumble onto a padded bench, brushing soot from your cloak. 3 jokes dart through your mind. Imagine a satyr composing a concerto on those stairs. Picture Hermes practicing scales before labeling corridors lyric. Or recall Apollo's sarcastic chuckle. Off-key again, mortal. You suppress laughter, wincing at the unexpected fall. You rise and scan the room. No harp strings remain, only a smooth marble floor etched with musical bars. A tiny inscription reads, "Harmony here leads to discord." Mainstream epigraphic studies observe that Greek aphorisms often paired poetic warnings with decorative motifs. You nod, acknowledging the lesson, then push through the nearby bolt-emblazoned door. This passage slopes steeply downward walls, narrowing until you slide through on your knees. Mainstream structural accounts confirm that tight squeezes were common in ritual mazes, symbolizing rebirth through constriction. You crawl forward, elbows scraping bronze, until the passage abruptly flares into a low arch studded with mirror shards. 3 final jokes surface. Imagine a minotaur calf gasping, "Too small for me." Picture satyrs wedged mid-corridor, trading whispered puns, or envision Hermes glancing in a shard mirror and quipping, "Narrow escapes suit you." You chuckle softly, careful not to jar loose the shards. You settle beneath the mirror-studded arch and peer upward. The shards capture fragmented reflections of every corridor you've traversed, tiling your journey in broken images. Mainstream psychologists note that fragmented mirrors induce fragmented memory recall, prompting explorers to piece together past choices. You trace a shard showing hoof prints, another echo chamber, and yet another cauldron table from the center cafe. Fringe Labyrinth archivists, however, claim these shards serve as lasting records, each containing a soul echo of traveler footsteps, readable only by divine smiths. Historians still argue whether mirror shards held memory or merely sparked introspection. Gathering your strength, you stand and emerge into a colonnaded hall where walls swirl with bas relief of winged sandals taking flight. The floor beneath you tilts slightly, directing your gaze upward to a ceiling hatch. Mainstream architectural findings identify such tilt floor mechanisms as safety features guiding lost visitors toward designated rescue exits. You step onto the hatch and feel it shift to form a sloping ramp back into the main labyrinth artery. Fringe rescue ritual historians propose these ramps were designed for divine intervention. Pilgrims, calling Hermes' name, could ascend the hatch without effort. Historians still argue whether tilt floor ramps served mortal rescue or mythic whims. At long last, you find yourself back beside the central spiral mosaic, the very heart where Section 13's cafe once stood. You dust off spent tile fragments and glance across the chamber to see Hermes leaning against a bronze pillar, arms crossed, and a teasing smile on his lips. He gestures you forward, a silent salute to your patience and skill. 3 soft jokes echo in your mind. Imagine Daedalus's ghost applauding your perseverance. Picture Apollo offering a lyre tune encore. Or recall Athena nodding in approval, owl perched on her shoulder. You smile, humbled and triumphant. In trickery in the turning halls, you battled pivoting walls, false exits, harp step surprises, and mirror mosaics, each twist a test of wit and will. You have learned that in Hermes' maze, cleverness and persistence outpace speed and bravado. With each turn, you have grown more attuned to metal's mutability and mind's resilience. As you step forward towards Section 16's accidental self-rescue, carry these lessons close in a maze designed by a trickster god. The greatest trick is trusting your own cunning. You find yourself in a dim corridor where the air hums with a faint metallic whisper. Walls of burnished bronze arch overhead, in a tunnel that seems both endless and intimately close. Here, in accidental self-rescue, the labyrinth's own flaws become your unlikely salvation as missteps, malfunctions, and forgotten mechanisms conspire to guide you home when all else fails. You probably won't survive the thrill of outwitting a trickster god by sheer happenstance without your heart pounding in gratitude. But lean in. Sometimes chaos yields its own kind of order. Your first accident comes when your foot catches on an uneven seam in the floor's bronze plating, sending you stumbling forward. Expecting a fall, you instead catch yourself on a low bronze ledge, one you hadn't noticed before. Mainstream structural surveys of labyrinth floors reveal that some panels were intentionally mismatched, meant to trip the unwary. You press down on the raised seam and feel it depress with a smooth click as a section of wall slides silently aside, revealing a narrow passage bathed in cool, pale light. 3 light jokes flicker through your mind. Imagine Hermes slipping on the same seam and discovering this exit. Picture a satyr lamenting, "If only I'd tripped sooner." Or recall Daedalus's ghost sneering design flaws my signature style. You grin stepping through the hidden gate. This new passage ascends gently, its walls lined with cuneiform carved into delicate relief. You trace the grooves fate favors the unplanned. Mainstream epigraphers note that such inscriptions often accompanied emergency exits in Roman arenas, warnings for those who found them by chance. Fringe inscriptional scholars, however, argue these runes mirror Hermes' own caduceus motto, a hidden joke only visible to those who dare stray. Historians still argue whether the inscription was a conscious design or a later addition by prankish initiates. Emerging into a small chamber, you see a battered winged sandal lying against a sunken relief. Your heart skips. This is Hermes' spare sandal, rumored lost during Section 7's sandal malfunction. Mainstream mythographers record that Hermes kept a single spare strapped inside the labyrinth's halfway point, a safety net for truly determined wanderers. You slip off your borrowed sandal and swap in the original, noting its exceptional fit and uncanny lightness. Fringe cobbler craft historians suggest these spares carried latent rote memory, spliced into their feathers, guiding wearers toward hidden exits. Historians still argue whether spare sandals truly held labyrinth lore or were simply divine vanity extras. With the authentic sandal's feathered wing humming at your heel, you notice a faint breeze drifting through a slender grate above. Leaning on tiptoe, you find a small lever concealed behind the grate's bronze bars. Pulling it triggers a soft hiss as steam vents from hidden channels and warms the cold corridor. Walls on either side ripple outward, revealing a wide spiral slide, an emergency egress designed perhaps by Daedalus himself during later renovations. You perch at the slide's lip, feeling its smooth polish. Three jokes surface. Imagine a minotaur shrieking as it slides past. Picture Apollo joking a shortcut for the lazy, or see Athena rolling her eyes. Should have asked me first. You hop onto the slide and whoosh downward, cloak fluttering like wings. You land in a cavernous foyer lined with reflective bronze panels, each marked with a single footstep-shaped indent. Mainstream architectural studies liken these to waymarker imprints, footsteps carved to mark approved pathways. You recognize your own footprints, advancing in a neat line, a breadcrumb trail of your journey. Following the imprints leads you past a row of silent murmurators, those low bronze flutes from Section 9, and into an adjoining hall where dangling lanterns cast long shadows. At the hall's far end, you find a trapdoor set flush with the floor, its ring pull engraved with the motif of a labyrinth within a labyrinth. Mainstream surveying of ancient Greek theaters unearthed similar trapdoors, granting surprise exits for actors. You grip the ring and lift the door hinges open smoothly, revealing a steep ladder descending into darkness. You hesitate. Ladders in mazes often lead to oubliettes, but above you, a single inscription reads, "Descent to Ascent." Trusting the labyrinth's own cryptic kindness, you climb down. The ladder deposits you into a narrow shaft lined with reflective bronze, every surface catching torchlight from your own flickering lamp. As you advance, the shaft curves, and you feel a gentle upward slope. Emerging into a final corridor, you see at its end a familiar sight. The silver-lined door Hermes teased you with in Section 4. Its silver inlays gleam softly, marking the return path. Mainstream wayfinding experts note that silver-lined corridors often reconnect to main entrances, serving as emergency return routes. Fringe labyrinth. Psychologists argue these markers only appear to those who've earned them through endurance. Historians still argue whether emergency routes were public knowledge or divine secrets shared by fortune. You press the silver-rimmed door's handle and walk through into the courtyard's moonlit air, where the central spiral mosaic gleams beneath a canopy of stars. The labyrinth's living walls have receded, leaving only the etched pattern of concentric circuits. You stand for a moment catching your breath, sandals humming softly with new purpose. 3 final jokes drift through your mind. Imagine Hermes dusting his spare sandal proudly. Picture Daedalus's ghost raising an approving hammer. Or see Athena nodding owl perched on her shoulder. Resourceful, aren't we? You smile widely, filling your lungs with night air. In accidental self-rescue, you discovered that even in a maze of divine trickery, overlooked grooves, spare sandals, and hidden levers can become lifelines. Guided by chance missteps and forgotten safety nets, you outwitted the maze, not by speed or strategy alone, but by openness to serendipity. As you step away from the labyrinth's threshold, carry its lesson close. Sometimes escape finds the unwary, and the most profound rescues come when we least expect them. You step into a chamber that feels oddly tired. The polished bronze walls, once gleaming and taut, now sag slightly at the seams, a faint creak resonating underfoot. Here, in the wall's exhausted lament. The labyrinth itself seems to sigh as if even metal grows weary of endless shifts and schemes. You probably won't survive the melancholy of sentient walls confessing cosmic fatigue without your heart swelling with sympathy, but lean in each groan and tremor carries a hidden plea born of eons of motion. As you pause at the chamber's center, a low rumble vibrates through the floor. Mainstream metallurgists note that bronze panels, stressed by repeated hinge cycles, develop microfractures that release energy as audible groans near 400 hertz, just at the threshold of human hearing. You catch the quiver in the metal, a tremor, like a held breath, exhaled too late. Fringe acoustic anthropologists, however, claim these sounds are the maze's lament echoes of every traveler's footfall, imprinted in the metal's memory, replayed as sorrowful resonance. Historians still argue whether the wall's creaks stem from physics or phantom memories. Leaning closer to the nearest panel, you hear a whispered tone, almost a voice murmuring, "Not again." You blink, wondering if fatigue has borrowed your mind's voice. 3 light jokes flit through your thoughts. Imagine the labyrinth begging for a coffee break. Picture a Cyclops guard offering sympathy with a thermos of ambrosia. Or recall Hermes texting, "BRB, need a nap." You stifle a chuckle, mindful that humor here feels tender, like comforting a child. Above you, the vaulted ceiling's bronze ribs sag in gentle curves, each seam shimmering with fine cracks. Mainstream architectural surveys of ancient domed halls warn that bronze domes under cyclical thermal stress can deform by up to 2 centimeters over centuries. You gaze upward, feeling the weight of those shifts in your chest. Fringe structural mythologists propose that the labyrinth's ceiling drapes itself like a weary cloak, an intentional design to remind wanderers that even divine constructs tire. Historians still argue whether sagging ceilings are proof of time's passage or divine self-awareness. You run a hand along a seam where 2 walls meet and feel the joint's spine, tiny ridges that shift under your touch. Mainstream engineers describe creep deformation, where metal flows imperceptibly under prolonged stress. You press more firmly, and the wall slides half a centimeter, its bronze finish dulling like age. Fringe, living architecture. Advocates, though, claim these joints breathe with the maze's pulse, exhaling sibilant warning to travelers who linger too long. Historians still argue whether shifting seams are maintenance concerns or intentional heartbeat signs. 3 light jokes whisper through your mind. Again, imagine Daedalus's ghost offering mini oil cans to every panel. Picture Athena shaking her head, "You should have built it with stone." Or Hermes appearing in a lab coat, checking a gauge and muttering, "These hinges will be the death of me." You bite your lip to keep from laughing aloud, struck by the labyrinth's surprisingly human vulnerability. Ahead, a corridor's panels bow inward, so subtly you almost miss the narrowing. You squeeze through the constricted arch and enter a small niche where a single bronze plaque reads, "Even gods need rest." Mainstream epigraphers note that such inscriptions appear in temple rest areas, brief sanctuaries where priests paused between rituals. You trace the letters, feeling their carved edges beneath your fingertip. Fringe glyph revisionists argue the inscription was initially added by Hermes himself in a rare moment of honesty, a confession hidden from mortal eyes. Historians still argue whether the plaque reflects divine fatigue or playful, mythic editing. You notice a nearby brazier's flame, sputtering its light, struggling to catch on the blackened bronze beneath. You step closer and find embers dampened by invisible moisture, a sign that hidden condensation has formed within wall cavities as metal cools unevenly. Mainstream conservationists warn that moisture fosters patina and weakens bronze over millennia. You cup your hands around the brazier, feeling its feeble warmth. Fringe ritualists, however, believe the brazier's flicker is the maze's breath, its flame ebbing and flowing with the labyrinth's energy. Historians still argue whether maze breaths are natural condensation or soul stirs. With a soft creak, the wall across from you bows outward, revealing a narrow bench inset in a shallow alcove. On it rests a small, tarnished bowl of water, an offering of respite, perhaps left by a thoughtful wanderer. You sit and touch the water's surface. Ripples spread silently, reflecting your weary face amid distorted panels. Mainstream social historians note that water features offered psychological relief in ancient baths and shrines. Fringe myth psychologists, though, claim that sipping labyrinth water grants temporary empathy with the maze, allowing wanderers to feel its fatigue and gain insight into its rhythms. Historians still argue whether labyrinth water was functional or allegorical. 3 final jokes drift at the edges of your mind. Imagine a satyr offering a massage to tired bronze panels. Picture a group of centaurs staging a flash mob to pep up the corridors. Or recall a rumor that Athena once gifted the maze a mechanical harp to cheer it up. You smile softly, moved by the warmth of these imagined comforts. Rising from the bench, you notice the alcove's back wall, marked with a faint arrow, an emergency exit marker, known only to those attuned to the labyrinth's morale. Pressing along a concealed seam, you find the hidden lever that opens a narrow door. As it swings inward, the corridor beyond brightens the air, lightning, as though you've left behind a burdensome companion. You step through the wall's creaks, receding to distant echoes. In the wall's exhausted lament, you discovered that the labyrinth itself has voice and feeling, its aged metal yearning for stillness, even as it continues its endless dance. You've seen its fatigue, tended its creaks, and offered it solace in quiet moments. As you leave this chamber of metal, sighs behind, carry with you the lesson that empathy, even for stone and bronze, can reveal. Hidden paths, sometimes an exhausted heart, divine or mortal, holds the key to liberation. You step into a circular chamber, paved with polished marble and ringed by golden thrones, Mount Olympus's council hall, where Hermes must offer his sheepish report for the labyrinth's endless mischief. The air is heavy with the scent of laurel wreaths and ambrosia incense, a heady reminder that here divine patience runs thinner than mortal silk. You probably won't survive the awkward hush that follows a trickster god's apology without wincing for him, but lean in each bowed head and averted gaze carries the weight of cosmic reproach and reluctant forgiveness. Hermes stands before Zeus's great throne, sandals scuffed and cloak dust smeared. Mainstream mythographers record that Zeus's throne room sat atop a circular platform in Pythia, flanked by Doric columns, carved with eagle motifs, a setting befitting the king of gods. You note the column capitals etched with thunderbolts, each catch of torchlight reflecting the storm lord's mood. Fringe oracle tales, however, claim the columns themselves whisper Zeus's latest grievances to Hermes. In the silent hours, ensuring the messenger arrives with preemptive remorse. Historians still argue whether these whispering columns are literal sanctum mechanisms or poetic inventions to dramatize divine displeasure. Clearing his throat, Hermes raises a hand, caduceus glinting, "Great Father," and all gathered, he begins voice, uncharacteristically tremulous. Mainstream Homeric epics describe Hermes' usual confident tone, silver-tongued and light-footed, making this humble introduction all the more remarkable. You sense the hall inhale as his words echo off marble. Fringe, divine psychologists suggest that Hermes' tremor stemmed from guilt-induced feedback in his sandals, which vibrate sympathetically with his emotions. Historians still argue whether divine artifacts truly resonate with godly feelings or remain symbolic flourishes. Hermes continues, "I stand before you to confess that my labyrinth has exceeded expectations." He offers a wry half-smile. 3 gentle jokes flicker in your mind. Imagine a mortal maze designer summoning their boss to admit that the thing got away from me. Picture Athena rolling her eyes behind Pegasus, whispering, "I told you to scale it back." Or recall Apollo muttering, "Overkill, much." You suppress laughter, mindful that even the gods crave humor when tension is high. Zeus's deep voice rumbles, cunning as ever, "Hermes." But he raises a hand, and the rumble halts like a gavel strike. You have created chaos in realms both mortal and divine. You feel the censure prickling on your skin like static. Mainstream sources recount that Zeus prized order above all his law, inscribed on stone tablets in Dodona's grove. Fringe celestial law treatises, however, argue that Zeus's edicts subtly reference labyrinth trials, hinting he intended Hermes to build a test of cosmic balance, not 36. Historians still argue whether labyrinth lore shaped divine legislation or was later grafted onto Zeus's record. Hermes bows his head, sandals whispering on the marble floor. "I apologize for any." He pauses, finding words against the weight of an empire's law. Apollo, perched on his golden seat, quips, "Careful, brother, or we'll need another labyrinth to find your sincerity." Mainstream poetic fragments suggest Apollo's humor often cuts through tension, as when he once teased Hephaestus at a smithy. Fringe theatrical myths propose Apollo's jests were rehearsed lines delivered to maintain Olympus's goodwill, his sarcasm a ritual offering. Historians still argue whether Apollo's barbs are spontaneous or scripted by fate. Hermes straightens voice, steadier. "My intention was to forge a marvel of ingenuity, a testament to divine artistry." He gestures to the council, where Hera's jeweled peacock feathers remain unmoved. Mainstream iconography shows Hera's throne decorated with peacock motifs, symbols of watchful vigilance. You sense her eyes flick to each divine messenger, a silent reminder that betrayal breeds feline suspicion. Fringe matrimonial ritual scholars, though, claim Hera's peacocks once danced to labyrinth echoes, honoring Hermes' creation until its mischief married too many untimely ends. Historians still argue whether the peacock's disdain stems from mythic rancor or later narrative layers. Athena leans forward, owl perched on her arm. Marvel, yes, she concedes, tone measured, but a marvel that defied counsel. I advised restraint, yet it grew beyond even Daedalus's lesson. You recall Athena's earlier guidance in section 11. Her critique cuts sharper now under Olympian gaze. Fringe strategic myth analysts suggest Athena's reproach carries an unspoken pride in her foresight, seeing her advice ignored as personal defeat. Historians still argue whether Athena's guidance aimed at humility or jockeyed for creative credit. Hermes clears his throat again. I accept full. He hesitates before ending responsibility. Mainstream translations of divine speech often soften godly confessions. This abrupt term is striking. You sense the counsel shift at hearing a god assume true accountability. Fringe divine ethics proponents, though, maintain that such terms must be weighed for lexical nuance, responsibility. In Greek ethne, euthine implies both duty and culpability. Historians still argue whether Hermes grasped a refined concept of divine responsibility or simply offered a mortal-style apology. Zeus's thunderous chuckle breaks the tension. Let's not forget, you did provide excellent entertainment. He nods across to Dionysus, who raises a goblet. You catch the tang of grape spirits wafting from the divine table. Mainstream cultic records link Dionysian revels to catharsis through chaos, suggesting he found the labyrinth's turmoil restorative. Fringe revel myth suggests Dionysus secretly orchestrated some satyr intrusions in Section 6 to enhance his festival's carnival. Historians still argue whether Dionysian involvement was coincidental or collaborative mischief. Hera stands robes shimmering. Redemption lies in restoration. She pronounces, voice cool. You will dismantle the shifting halls and return them to mortal realms as monuments, mementos of divine folly. Mainstream ritual decrees mention gifts of temple relics sent to cities as offerings. These monuments would serve as instructive marvels. Fringe transformation. Ritual theorists argue Hera's decree veils a deeper lesson, transforming chaos into teaching tools, binds divine errors into human wisdom. Historians still argue whether Hera's directive is punitive or pedagogical. Hermes bows low in relief. At once, my queen. He retrieves a small key from his belt, engraved with a peacock feather and lightning bolt, symbolizing both Hera's watch and Zeus's will. Mainstream myth catalogs describe divine keys bestowed at council edicts. Fringe esoteric sources claim such keys open not doors, but possibilities, metaphors for unlocking change. Historians still argue whether these narrative keys denote physical artifacts or symbolic tokens. Athena nods, owl hooting softly. Let wisdom ripple outward, she advises. Hermes glances to you, eyes bright, with both gratitude and lingering mischief, then strides toward the exit arch. You feel the corridor's walls relax, their cold bronze sheen returning to a steady polish, as if all along they awaited this resolution. As you follow him out, Hermes murmurs in your ear, "Next time I'll just build a sundial." 3 final jokes sparkle. Imagine a sundial labyrinth where shadows chase travelers. Picture Athena face-palming at such moderation. Or envision Zeus rolling lightning bolts at the idea. You grin, stepping into the corridor beyond the council hall's marble hush, fading. In apology to Mount Olympus, you witnessed pride met with patience, mischief met with mercy, and chaos transmuted into lesson. Hermes's sheepish report, humble yet earnest, reminded both gods and mortals that brilliance unchecked can brim into folly. As you depart Hermes's side and leave Olympus's echoing hall, carry with you the paradox. Only when we own our missteps can we reshape them into monuments of wisdom. You step into a grand gallery where the labyrinth's lessons are cast in bronze relief. Twisting corridors morph into moral maxims carved along the walls. Each panel a polished proverb on the interplay of hubris, ingenuity, and consequence. Here, hubris, ingenuity, and maze morals unfolds a final reckoning where every triumphant escape and comical mishap coalesces into the maze's ultimate lesson. You probably won't survive the weight of ancient wisdom, delivered in gleaming metal, without pausing to reflect, but lean in. Each aphorism is a key to understanding not just the maze, but the restless spirit that birthed it. A soaring panel reads, "Pride begets labyrinths. Humility maps the way out." Mainstream mythographers link this maxim to Hesiod's warning that excessive pride invokes Nemesis's wrath. You trace the gilded letters and feel a thrill of recognition. Hermes's labyrinth was born of divine vanity, yet only tempered wit unveils its exit. Fringe, moral philosophers, though, argue that this line doubles as a social contract. Those who lord power must also design their own escape routes, lest they be trapped by their own arrogance. Historians still argue whether labyrinths in myth serve primarily as punishment for hubris or as neutral arenas for growth. Below, another relief depicts a figure crouched, lantern in hand, illuminating a dark corridor. Inscribed, "Ingenuity brightens the darkest turn." You recall every spark of creative escape, the hidden seam that revealed a secret door, the silver waypoints. You followed the unnoticed ledge that flung open the exit. Each moment of inventiveness glows in your memory. Fringe cognitive theorists maintain that Labyrinth challenges model real-world problem-solving. Facing dead ends teaches the brain to seek overlooked cues. Historians still argue whether Labyrinth myths inspired practical education in ancient workshops or remained symbolic fables. A third tableau shows twin figures, one blindfolded, the other unmasked, standing before a bronze mirror. The caption reads, "See both the maze and yourself. Truth lies between." You feel the weight of self-reflection. Every corridor forced you to confront your limits. Every mirror summoned self-awareness. Mainstream psychological studies note that self-reflection enhances adaptability under stress, key to navigating uncertainty. Fringe psychomythologists, however, claim mirrored trials in myth catalyze personal transformation, embedding moral truths in memory through metaphor. Historians still argue whether mirror labyrinth rituals guided initiates into wisdom or served narrative drama. At the far end, a final massive panel stretches floor to ceiling, a labyrinth drawn in reverse, spiraling outward toward an open sky, rays of light breaking from its center. Below, in bold bronze, escape is not the end. The path begins anew. You stand before it, torch held high, and sense the maze's cycle completing. Every step, misstep, and detour has woven experience into your soul, not merely delivered you home. Fringe existentialists argue that the labyrinth is a metaphor for life's perpetual unfolding. Each exit leads to fresh puzzles. Each solution births new questions. Historians still argue whether ancient labyrinth myths envisioned literal exits or perpetual journeys of the spirit. 3 gentle jokes drift in your mind. Imagine a minotaur offering sign language guidance at the exit. Picture Daedalus's ghost leaning against the wall with a cup of ambrosia, muttering, "Don't ask me for directions again." Or recall Hermes scribbling a cheeky postscript, "Tutorials forthcoming." You smile the relief of departure, mingling with the curiosity of what lies beyond the gallery's open arch. You step forward, passing beneath the reverse labyrinth's blazing aperture. The air brightens as sunlight natural this time floods your face. You feel a soft breeze, the scent of olive groves and distant earth, and sense that the maze's moral pillars have guided you to more than mere freedom. You carry its maxims, etched on bronze and lodged in your heart as you exit the final chamber. In hubris, ingenuity, and maze. Morals. You have witnessed the labyrinth's true design to humble pride, reward creativity, and forge self-insight. As you leave behind the gallery of gleaming proverbs and step into open world, remember that every maze, divine or mortal, offers both challenge and counsel, and that the wisdom gained in its turns lights every path ahead. You step into the labyrinth's final chamber, a vast circular hall, where bronze walls converge into a golden dome etched with cuneiform stars. The air is charged with expectancy, as though the maze itself holds its breath. Here, Hermes' next grand project unfurls a tantalizing glimpse of the messenger gods following over-ambitious scheme, whispered in glints of polished metal and in the half-heard rustle of caduceus wings. You probably won't survive the thrill of anticipating another divine puzzle without your mind racing, but Lean in the Maze's End is merely prologue to a new cosmic caper. At the hall's center stands a crystalline orb, cradled in a bronze nest, its surface swirling with molten light. Mainstream mythographers suggest this orb of beginnings symbolizes the cycle of creation and destruction, echoing Hesiod's theogony, where worlds rise and fall in endless rhythm. You trace the orb's glowing tendrils, feeling heat like a living pulse beneath your fingertips. Fringe, cosmological myth enthusiasts argue the orb is cooled, starlight harvested by Hermes from Helios's chariot, its every shimmer a record of solar journeys. Historians still argue whether the orb's lore predates Hermes' Labyrinth or emerged as a later embellishment in celestial lore. Hermes appears beside you, sandals silent on marble. He strokes his chin eyes, bright with that sly spark you've grown to recognize. "Congratulations on surviving my last creation," he says, voice warm. "But I'll need a fresh challenge, one that spans sky and sea." He pauses dramatically, and the orb flares, projecting bronze-hued constellations onto the dome. You watch as Orion's belt aligns with the labyrinth spiral, and Pisces' fish circuit its outer rim. Behold, Hermes continues the cosmic maze, an interstellar puzzle to guide lost souls through the constellations themselves. 3 light jokes flick through your mind. Imagine celestial satyrs zooming through the Milky Way on winged goats. Picture a minotaur stargazing, perplexed, at endless star paths. Or recall Apollo's sarcastic comment next time at a coffee station in Andromeda. You laugh softly, caught between wonder and mild apprehension. Ahead, bronze panels shift to reveal an ascending ramp ringed with planetary symbols. Mainstream archaeological parallels cite Hellenistic lighthouses with spiral ramps guiding ships. Here, the ramp might guide travelers skyward. You step onto the ramp, noticing that each planetary emblem resonates with a soft hum. Mercury's seal ticks like a clock. Venus's glows with warm resonance. Mars's rumbles low. Fringe astrological engineers argue these hums tune a traveler's aura to each planet's influence, granting safe passage through cosmic currents. Historians still argue whether planetary hum drives reflect imaginative myth or early proto-astrology experiments. Hermes points to a small hatch mid-ramp. Here lies the winged lantern, he explains. It will light your way through the void. Just twist the caduceus handle to ignite its star flame. Mainstream mythic inventories describe divine lanterns that burn celestial oil extracted from Helios's tears, bright enough to pierce the night sky. You reach for the caduceus handle, noting its cold bronze coils, and feel a thrill at touching divine craftsmanship. Fringe lantern historians claim the oil glows with quantum photons born from cosmic dawn itself. Historians still argue whether star flame lanterns existed in ritual or remain allegorical constructs. As you twist the handle, the winged lantern springs to life, casting gentle light that ripples across the ramp's curvature. The ramp now tilts upward at a steeper angle, and you feel a gentle tug, as if gravity itself bends to the lantern's glow. Hermes smiles and adds, "Gravity is negotiable when guided by a god's light." Mainstream sources reference similar temple elevators powered by counterweights. Here, divine light seems the true force. Fringe. Physics myth scholars propose these lanterns manipulated local gravimetric fields, a wonder of ancient experimental cosmology. Historians still argue whether mythic lantern lifts reflect real temple machinery or poetic license. You ascend into a domed antechamber where 4 colossal archways stand, each crowned with a different emblem: the winged sandal, the caduceus, the labyrinth spiral, and a crescent moon. Hermes explains, choose your path, speed, communication complexity, or mystery. Mainstream labyrinth texts often end with choice junctions symbolizing free will granted after trials. You laugh softly, knowing your impulse's speed resonates with Hermes's birthright. Communication honors his role as messenger. Complexity mirrors his inventive spirit. Mystery speaks to the unknown that perpetually beckons. Fringe mythic choice theorists argue these archways map psychological archetypes, guiding initiates toward destiny's facets. Historians still argue whether such symbol junctions served genuine initiatory rites or narrative flair. Hermes steps back and bows. Whichever you choose, he says, is the doorway to my next grand endeavor, and perhaps to worlds beyond your reckoning. You feel the launch of possibility, unfolding an interstellar labyrinth, awaiting its first explorers. 3 final jokes glimmer. Imagine a satyr stuck at the communication arch, dialing celestial speed dial. Picture a minotaur at the complexity gate muttering, "Too many twists," or see Athena dropping by to offer unsolicited counsel on cosmic ethics. You grin, heart alight with anticipation. With the winged lantern glowing in your hand and choice before you, you stand at the brink of that cosmic maze. Once again, Hermes's creation unfolds before your feet. He waits, caduceus, aloft, gaze challenging and kind. The labyrinth's final lesson has passed, but its spirit endures, whispering of adventures yet to dawn among stars. In the hush of aftermath, let your breath slow to the gentle cadence of a lantern's flicker. Picture the bronze walls of the cosmic maze folding away into infinite night. The winged lantern's glow softening every edge. Feel the warmth of Hermes' spark still pulsing in your palm, a gentle ember guiding your thoughts as you drift toward rest. Breathe deeply, exhaling each echo of footsteps and turmoil, inhaling the cool promise of silence. Let images of spiral ramps, celestial holograms, and golden archways blur into a tapestry of fading light. Each metallic shimmer dissolves into memory, weaving your journey into dream's gentle loom. Recall the laughter shared with satyrs' gods and your own echo, and let it settle like stardust on your lids. Allow your mind to wander among constellations once charted by Hermes' caduceus, Orion's steadfast belt, the eagle's silent flight, the swan's crossing. In dreams you may glide along astral corridors guided by the hum of planetary symbols and the whisper of forgotten runes. Each constellation's song becomes a lullaby, resonating in your thoughts until they soften into sleep. As the lantern's glow dims, you sense the labyrinth's living essence, abiding in stillness, its spirit at rest, awaiting dawn's renewal. Embrace the gentle hush, the lull of possibility, and the tender ache of wondrous discovery. Let your thoughts drift like embers on cooled bronze, settling into quiet slumber. Now surrender to night's embrace. Carry in your heart the labyrinth's final promise that every end opens to new beginnings, every choice sparks new adventures, and every dream shines with the light of destinies yet to be wrought.